are fired! Get out of my shop right now! Pack your things and take your child with you.
I wasn't breaking it, ma'am. I just fixed the timing issue.
The billion-dollar racing empire was dying, and nobody knew the janitor mopping their floors had already saved them once. 11 days. That's how long Vortex Motorsports' championship engine had been dead. 11 days of panic, of engineers shouting theories across war rooms, of a young CEO watching her inherited legacy crumble. Then one night, a maintenance worker nobody remembered hiring slipped past security and did what an army of experts couldn't. By morning, the engine purred like it remembered how to breathe. But instead of thanks, Ryan Cole got fired. Stick around. Drop a like. Comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happens next, nobody saw it coming. The fluorescent lights in Workshop C7 buzzed like dying insects at 2:47 a.m. Ryan Cole stood in front of the GT7 engine, his reflection warped across its chrome manifold, and felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on his shoulders like a physical thing. He wasn't supposed to be here. His clearance badge, the yellow one that marked him as basement-level maintenance, wouldn't open these doors. But Ryan had designed the security system back when he was someone else, someone important, and he'd left himself a back door because even then, he'd known how companies worked, how they forgot, how they erased. The engine sat silent on its diagnostic mount, surrounded by scattered tools and printouts covered in desperate red annotations. Ryan recognized the handwriting. Marcus Chen, senior engineer. Good guy. Not good enough for this, though. Nobody here was. They'd been chasing ghosts for 11 days, throwing parts at a problem they didn't understand because they'd learned from manuals instead of from the machine itself. Ryan pulled on a pair of latex gloves. Not the heavy work gloves from his maintenance cart, but the thin surgical kind he kept in his locker for moments like this. His hands had changed in 10 years. The calluses sat in different places now. He earned them fixing toilets and cleaning grease traps instead of building dreams from titanium and mathematics. But the knowledge was still there, buried deep, like muscle memory that never quite forgot. He started with the compression sensors, touched them without tools first, feeling for the microscopic stress fractures that wouldn't show up on any scan because they existed in the space between what the computer could measure and what human intuition could sense. His fingers found it immediately, a hairline crack in the mounting bracket that shifted the sensor 0.03 millimeters out of alignment. Invisible. Fatal. The problem wasn't the sensor. It never was. The problem was that someone had improved his original design 3 years ago, replacing his custom fabricated brackets with cheaper manufactured ones that looked identical but weren't. The new brackets distributed stress differently. Over time, under the specific resonance frequency of the GT7 at racing speeds, they developed faults that made the engine's computer brain hallucinate problems that didn't exist and ignore problems that did. Ryan had written a warning about this exact scenario in his original documentation. 67 pages of detailed failure analysis that nobody working here tonight had ever read. He worked quickly, methodically, the way he used to work when he was R. Cole, chief design engineer, instead of Ryan Cole, the overnight maintenance guy who people sometimes called the quiet one when they remembered he existed at all. His daughter Lily would be asleep now in their apartment 12 miles away, her nightlight projecting stars across her ceiling, her breathing soft and even, the way it only got when she felt completely safe. She was the reason he was here. Not for Vortex, not for pride, or recognition, or revenge, but because if this engine failed during the championship race in 3 days, someone would die. And Ryan had spent the last 6 years of his life making sure his daughter never had to learn that the world was the kind of place where people died in preventable accidents while other people looked the other way. He'd learned that lesson for both of them. The repair took 3 hours. He fabricated a replacement bracket from raw stock using the workshop's milling machine, matching his original specs from memory. He recalibrated the sensor array. He rewrote sections of the timing code that had drifted from his original algorithms. He did everything the senior engineers should have done if they'd understood the machine they were trying to fix. At 5:53 a.m., Ryan powered up the engine. It caught on the first rotation, settled into a rhythm that sounded less like machinery and more like breathing. He stood there listening to it, remembering when he'd first heard that sound in this same workshop a lifetime ago, when Sarah had still been alive, when he'd believed building things that moved fast and won races was the most important thing a person could do with their hands and brain. He powered it down, cleaned his tools, erased his access logs from the security system. By 6:30, he was back in the maintenance office, changing into his regular work clothes, becoming invisible again. The day shift found the working engine at 7:15. Ryan heard the shouts from 2 floors down where he was fixing a clogged drain in the executive bathroom. Heard them running diagnostic after diagnostic, unable to believe what they were seeing. Perfect compression, perfect timing, perfect everything. He smiled a little, there in the bathroom with his hands in someone else's waste pipe, and thought about Lily, about the dinosaur-shaped pancakes he'd make her for breakfast, about her teacher conference next week, about normal things that didn't explode or fail or kill people. He almost made it out. Cole, who? Ryan Cole. The voice came from behind him as he was loading his maintenance cart at the end of his shift. He turned to find Marcus Chen standing there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Probably hadn't. Yeah? You worked last night. Overnight shift. Ryan's face remained perfectly neutral. Every night. It's my schedule. You were in workshop C7. I clean all the workshops. It's in my route. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Ryan could see him trying to make the math work, trying to connect the quiet maintenance worker with the impossible repair. But the gap was too wide. People saw what they expected to see. A janitor was a janitor. An engineer was an engineer. They weren't the same person because they couldn't be the same person. The engine's fixed, Marcus said finally. That's good. I heard people shouting about it. Nobody knows how, Ryan shrugged. Above my pay grade, man. I just mop floors. Marcus opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, but then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw there made his face go pale. I have to go. They're calling an emergency meeting. He left. Ryan finished loading his cart and punched out at exactly 4 p.m. like he did every day. He took the bus home because his truck had died 6 months ago, and he couldn't afford to fix it. He picked up Lily from after-school care and listened to her explain the complex social dynamics of first-grade recess politics. He made spaghetti for dinner, the budget kind from the dollar store, not the fancy stuff Sarah used to make. After Lily went to bed, he sat at their tiny kitchen table with a cup of gas station coffee and let himself remember. Sarah's laugh, the way she used to steal his engineering pencils and use them to sketch wildflowers in the margins of his technical drawings. The phone call from the hospital, the choice he'd made in the seconds after learning she was gone, to be the kind of father their daughter deserved, even if it meant being nothing else ever again. He'd walked away from everything, the career, the reputation, the future Victoria's father had promised him. Became a ghost. Changed his employment records, buried his credentials, took jobs where nobody asked questions or expected brilliance. Did it all so Lily would have at least one parent who came home every night, who was present instead of brilliant, who chose her over everything else, always, the way Sarah would have wanted. The phone on his kitchen wall rang at 11:30 p.m. Ryan stared at it. Nobody called him. He had no friends, no family. His landlord used email. Lily's school had his cell number. He answered anyway. Is this Ryan Cole? A woman's voice, young, tense, authority underneath the tension. Who's asking? Victoria Vaughn. I'm the CEO of E. I know who you are. Ryan had watched her from a distance for 2 years, ever since she took over after her father died. Watched her try to fill shoes too big for anyone. Watched the company he'd helped build start to rot from the inside because she didn't know what she didn't know. I need you to come in tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. My office. I work at 4 p.m. Overnight maintenance. Not anymore. You're reassigned. 8 a.m. Don't be late. She hung up before he could respond. Ryan stood there holding the dead phone, feeling the future shift underneath him like tectonic plates grinding together before an earthquake. He called Mrs. Park, the elderly Korean woman next door, who sometimes watched Lily when Ryan's shift changed. She agreed immediately, the way she always did, refusing payment the way she always did. Ryan suspected she was lonely. He suspected she reminded him of Sarah's grandmother. They had an unspoken arrangement built on mutual need and carefully maintained boundaries. At 7:45 a.m., Ryan stood outside Vortex Motorsport headquarters in the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have stains. He hadn't been through the front entrance in 10 years. The building looked the same but felt different, like visiting a childhood home after growing up and realizing it was smaller than memory claimed. Security stopped him at the lobby. His maintenance badge didn't grant access to the executive floors. They made calls, checked lists. Finally, a young assistant with an iPad and aggressive heels appeared and escorted him to an elevator that required a key card he didn't have. "You're the maintenance guy?" she asked, looking at him like he was a specimen. "Yeah." "Weird. Ms. Vaughn never meets with facilities staff." Ryan said nothing. The elevator opened onto the 20th floor, all glass and steel and views of the city that cost more per square foot than Ryan's entire apartment. The assistant led him past a conference room where engineers were having what looked like a celebration. Someone had brought champagne. They were toasting the GT7's miraculous resurrection. Victoria Vaughn's office occupied the corner. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than Ryan's annual salary. She stood with her back to the door, looking out at the skyline, her posture rigid in a way that suggested she'd been standing like that for a while. "Ms. Vaughn? Your 8 o'clock is here." Victoria turned. Ryan's first thought was that she looked tired. His second thought was that she looked like her father. Same sharp features, same gray eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. His third thought was that she was younger than he'd realized. 30 at most. 29 maybe. Too young to be running a billion-dollar company. Too young to have buried her father a year ago. "Leave us," Victoria told the assistant. The door clicked shut. Silence filled the space between them, like water rising. "Sit," Victoria said. Ryan sat in one of the expensive chairs. It was the most comfortable thing he'd touched in years. He hated it immediately. Victoria moved to her desk but didn't sit. She stood there, arms crossed, studying him with an intensity that made Ryan feel like she was trying to see through his skin. "You fixed the GT7. Not a question. Ryan stayed quiet. "I've been going through the security footage," Victoria continued. "Our system supposedly tracks every entry and exit, but there's nothing from Workshop C7 between midnight and 6 a.m. on the night before the engine started working. No badge scans, no thermal signatures, nothing." "Sounds like a glitch." "We don't have glitches. We have Apex security systems, military grade. Cost us $7 million to install." Ryan almost smiled. He'd helped design that system, left himself a back door. Left a lot of back doors, actually, because he'd understood even then that companies were only loyal until they weren't. "So either our $7 million security system failed," Victoria said, "or someone who knew how to circumvent it was in that workshop." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Marcus Chen seems to think you're more than you pretend to be. Marcus is stressed. Everyone's stressed. The race is in 3 days. 2 days now." "2 days?" "Right." Victoria finally sat, leaned back in her chair with the careful control of someone who'd learned never to show weakness. "I pulled your employment file." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Okay. It's thin. One reference from a temp agency that doesn't exist anymore. Address history that gets fuzzy past 5 years ago. You applied for a maintenance position 23 months ago. We hired you because we were desperate for overnight coverage. You've never called in sick, never caused problems, never stood out in any way." "Sounds about right." "It sounds wrong. It sounds like someone trying very hard to be forgettable." Victoria opened a drawer and pulled out a tablet, tapped it a few times. "We have 67 engineers on staff. I've met most of them. They all have the same energy. They want to be seen, want credit, want to climb the ladder. But you? You're the opposite. You actively avoid attention. Some people just want to do their job and go home. To what? A 6-year-old daughter named Lily, who goes to Roosevelt Elementary. An apartment in Section 8 housing. No car, no social life, no history before your wife died. It's like you didn't exist before 6 years ago." Ryan's hands clenched. "You investigated me. I investigate everyone. My daughter is off limits." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. The calculation faltered, replaced by something almost human. "I'm not threatening your daughter. I'm trying to understand who you are." "I'm nobody. I fix things and go home." "You fixed a GT7 engine that stumped our entire senior engineering team." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Victoria stood again, started pacing like she couldn't stay still. "Because I ran the security footage through advanced enhancement. Thermal imaging showed someone in that workshop for exactly 3 hours and 14 minutes. The thermal signature matches your body type. And the work itself? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The work is perfect. Better than perfect. It's elegant, like whoever did it understood the machine at a level our current engineers don't. Ryan said nothing. His mind was racing, calculating exit strategies. He could walk out. They couldn't force him to confess to something that would only make him more valuable to them. But walking out meant they'd keep digging, might find things he'd buried deep, might connect dots that would unravel the quiet life he'd built for Lily. I should fire you, Victoria said quietly. You accessed restricted areas without authorization, used company equipment without permission, violated about 15 different protocols. So fire me. I can't, not yet. She returned to her desk, pulled out a folder. Physical paper, not digital. Because my COO is demanding I fire you. And when Donald Sterling demands something that strongly, I've learned to do the opposite. Ryan's blood went cold at the name. Donald Sterling, the ambitious VP who'd been circling power since before Victoria's father died. The man who'd probably stolen Ryan's original GT7 documentation and buried his authorship. Ryan had suspected for years but never had proof. Donald says you're a liability, Victoria continued, says we can't have maintenance staff breaking into secure areas regardless of the outcome. Says it sets a bad precedent. He wants you gone today. Wants me to press charges, actually. Make an example. And what do you want? Victoria looked at him for a long moment. I want to know why a maintenance worker knows how to fix an engine my senior engineers couldn't. I want to know why Marcus Chen looked at you like he'd seen a ghost. I want to know who you really are, Ryan Cole. The door burst open. Donald Sterling strode in without knocking, all-expensive suit and fake smile and barely contained rage. He was 50-something, silver hair, the kind of face that looked trustworthy in boardrooms and ruthless in private. He glanced at Ryan with barely concealed contempt before focusing on Victoria. Ms. Vaughn, I thought we discussed this, the security breach. I'm handling it, Donald. By having coffee with the perpetrator? Victoria, your father would never have... My father isn't here. Her voice went sharp. I am, and I'll handle my own personnel decisions. Donald's smile turned brittle. Of course. I'm simply concerned about liability. If word gets out that we're keeping an employee who committed what amounts to corporate espionage, he fixed the engine, Ryan said quietly. Both of them turned to look at him. He immediately regretted speaking, but something about Donald's smug face had sparked the part of him that used to argue with investors and defend his designs against committees who didn't understand them. Excuse me, Donald said. The person who accessed Workshop C7. They fixed the engine. Doesn't that count for something? Donald's expression hardened. What counts is following procedure. Rules exist for a reason. Without them, we have chaos. Without them, you'd have lost the championship. You don't know that. I know your engineering team had 11 days and got nowhere. I know the race is in 2 days. I know that engine is running perfectly for the first time since the problem started. Math seems pretty simple. Victoria was watching him with renewed interest. Donald was turning red. Who do you think you are? Donald stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. You're a maintenance worker. You're nobody. You don't speak to executives like Donald, Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. That's enough. He needs to understand his place. His place is wherever I say it is, and right now, I say it's in this office, having a conversation you're interrupting. Donald's jaw worked like he was chewing words too bitter to swallow. Fine, but I want it on record that I strongly advised against this. When it backfires, and it will, I want it clear that I counseled termination. Noted. Close the door on your way out. Donald left, but not before giving Ryan a look that promised consequences. The door clicked shut harder than necessary. Victoria sank into her chair. He's been my father's second-in-command for 15 years. I can't just fire him. Why not? Because he controls half the board. Because he knows where all the bodies are buried. Because firing him would start a war I can't win. She rubbed her temples. You know what the hardest part of this job is? It's not the engineering. It's not the competition. It's navigating all these men who think they should have my position instead. Ryan thought about Sarah, about the way she'd navigated her own career as one of 3 women in her accounting firm, about the extra hours she'd worked, the extra competence she'd had to prove, the careful politics she'd managed while pregnant and exhausted and still somehow brilliant. "Your father believed in you," Ryan said. "That should be enough." Victoria looked at him sharply. "You didn't know my father. I know he built this company from nothing. I know he cared about the work more than the money. I know he wouldn't have left it to you if he didn't think you could handle it." "How would you know any of that?" Ryan realized his mistake too late. He was saying things maintenance workers shouldn't know, revealing knowledge he wasn't supposed to have. "Company history," he said quickly. "Everyone knows the story." Victoria didn't look convinced, but she let it go. Instead, she pulled a piece of paper from her folder and slid it across the desk. "This is a final warning. Official documentation of your security breach. Sign it, and you keep your job. Refuse, and I have to let you go." Ryan looked at the paper. Standard corporate language. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Promise not to repeat the offense. It was a trap. Signing meant admitting he'd fixed the engine, which meant questions he couldn't answer. "What if I don't sign, but don't refuse either?" "That's not how this works." "What if I offer you something better instead?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Ryan took a breath. This was the moment. The choice. He could walk away, disappear again, find another minimum wage job in another forgotten corner of another company. Or he could trust this woman he didn't know with a truth that could destroy everything he'd built. He thought of Lily, of the championship race in 2 days, of the flaw he'd warned about in his original documentation that nobody had ever fixed. "The GT7 has a problem," Ryan said. "Not the problem your engineers found. A different problem. One that won't show up in testing but will show up at race speeds. Specifically at speeds above 240, under sustained load, when the outside temperature is above 85 degrees. Victoria leaned forward. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that killed my wife." The words fell into silence. Ryan hadn't said them out loud in 6 years, hadn't let himself connect those dots explicitly, even though they'd lived in his head every single day. "Your wife died in a car accident," Victoria said slowly. "I saw it in your file. She died because a component failed that shouldn't have failed, because someone cut corners on a safety system, because profit mattered more than engineering integrity." Ryan met her eyes. "The GT7 has a similar flaw. Not the same, but similar. In the cooling system. Under specific conditions, it'll fail, and when it fails at race speed, the driver won't have time to react. That's impossible. We've run hundreds of tests. Not the right tests. You've tested the engine as it exists now with the modifications your team made over the past 3 years. But those modifications moved stress points, changed thermal dynamics, created failure modes that didn't exist in the original design." "How would you know that?" Ryan stood up. "You wanted to know who I am. Here it is. I'm the person who can save your driver's life. I'm also the person who's walking out of this office right now because I've got a kid to pick up from school, and I don't have time for corporate politics." He made it to the door before Victoria spoke again. "Wait." He paused, hand on the doorknob. "The original GT7 design files," Victoria said. "Where would I find them?" "Archive server, folder labeled Arcole Legacy. Your father never deleted them. I checked." Ryan opened the door. "Read them before the race, especially the appendix. Page 63 specifically." "Why page 63? "Because that's where I explained exactly how someone would die if you ignored my warnings." He left her there, standing in her expensive office with her expensive view, and took the service elevator back down to the basement where he belonged. Mrs. Park was making dumplings when Ryan picked up Lily that evening. She sent them home with a container full, refusing payment with the gentle stubbornness of someone who understood that pride and poverty were complicated dancing partners. Lily chattered about her day, about the classroom hamster who'd escaped and been found in the art supplies, about the spelling test she'd aced, about the boy named Marcus who'd pushed her friend Emma and gotten time out. "Did you tell the teacher?" Ryan asked. "Emma did. I was just there." Sometimes being there is enough. They ate dumplings at the kitchen table. Lily did homework while Ryan pretended to read the newspaper but actually thought about Victoria Vaughn sitting in her office, deciding whether to believe a maintenance worker or fire him. About Donald Sterling planning whatever revenge men like him planned when they felt threatened. About the GT7 running perfectly right up until the moment it killed someone. After Lily went to bed, Ryan pulled out his old laptop, Ancient, barely functional, but it had files on it he couldn't risk storing anywhere else. He opened the encrypted folder containing every calculation, every blueprint, every warning he'd ever written about the GT7. Page 63 of the appendix detailed thermal cascade failure under specific racing conditions. The scenario was simple: sustained high speed plus high ambient temperature plus the modified cooling bracket design would create a feedback loop that would eventually cause the coolant system to fail catastrophically. The engine would seize. At racing speeds, the driver would have maybe 2 seconds to react. Not enough time. Ryan had written 13 different solutions to the problem. Any one of them would have worked, but implementing them required understanding the engine at a fundamental level, required seeing it as an integrated system instead of separate components, required the original designer's insight. He'd come back to save a life, maybe multiple lives. But standing in that office today, looking at Victoria Vaughn's exhausted face and seeing echoes of her father's determination, Ryan had realized something that scared him more than anything else. He'd missed this. Missed being seen as someone who knew things, missed mattering in ways that went beyond fixing clogged toilets and making dinosaur pancakes. And that was dangerous, because mattering meant being visible, and being visible meant risk, and risk meant potentially losing the small, safe life he'd built for Lily. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ryan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Cole? Not Victoria this time. A man's voice. Older. Familiar somehow. Who is this? Dominic Reeves. I worked with you 10 years ago. I'm retired now, but I still hear things. Dominic. Ryan remembered him. A workshop supervisor who'd been kind when Ryan was a 21-year-old prodigy who didn't understand workplace politics. How did you get my number? Same way I got your story. I pay attention. I remember. Dominic paused. Victoria called me today. Asked about the original GT7 team. I didn't tell her about you, but I think you should. I can't. You mean you won't. There's a difference. Either way, the answer's the same. Ryan, listen to me. Victoria's not her father, but she's got his heart. She cares about the work, about doing things right. Donald Sterling's been poisoning that company from the inside for years, and she doesn't see it yet because she's too busy trying to prove she belongs. Not my problem. It becomes your problem when that engine fails and someone dies. When you have to explain to Lily why you could have stopped it but didn't. Ryan closed his eyes. That's not fair. Fair? You disappeared 6 years ago. Erased yourself. Left me and Marcus and everyone else who worked with you thinking you'd quit because you couldn't handle your wife's death. We thought you were weak, Ryan. Turned out you were the strongest person there. I'm not strong. I'm just a father trying to survive. You're both. And right now, Victoria needs someone who's both. Someone who won't fold when Sterling pushes back. Someone who gives a damn about the engineering more than the politics. I can't go back to that life. Maybe. But you can stop pretending you're not still living it. You fixed that engine, Ryan. You came back because you couldn't help yourself. Because you're still the same person who designed it in the first place. Dominic hung up. Ryan sat there in his dark kitchen, listening to the apartment building's nighttime sounds. Neighbors arguing upstairs, traffic from the street, his daughter's soft breathing from the bedroom they shared. He thought about page 63, about thermal cascade failure, about 2 seconds not being enough time. At midnight, Ryan's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. Found the files. Read page 63. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. The old workshop on 7th Street, the one we shut down last year. Come alone. VV. Ryan stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Then he sat down and wrote a note to Mrs. Park, asking if she could watch Lily tomorrow evening, asking if she minded doing it on short notice. He knew what he was doing, knew he was making a choice that would change everything. But Dominic was right. He'd never really left. He'd just been hiding, and hiding only worked until someone needed saving. The workshop on 7th Street had been Vortex's original facility before they built the corporate campus. Ryan had spent thousands of hours there in his early 20s, learning from Victoria's father, building the GT7 from concept to reality. The building was condemned now, scheduled for demolition next month. Ryan arrived at 5:45 p.m., parking his borrowed bike in the alley. The door opened at his touch. Victoria had already disabled the lock. Inside, the space was exactly as he remembered. Dust-covered equipment, empty workbenches, the ghost of his former life preserved in abandonment. Victoria was already there, standing next to the same diagnostic station where they'd first fired up the GT7 prototype. She'd traded her CEO uniform for jeans and a Vortex Motorsport hoodie. She looked younger, more real. "You came," she said. "You knew I would. I hoped." Victoria pulled out a tablet, pulled up the files he'd written a decade ago. "I read everything. Not just page 63, all of it. Every calculation, every warning, every brilliant, insane idea you had about how to build an engine that could change motorsport." Ryan said nothing. "The documentation is signed R. Cole, but when I searched our current database for R. Cole, nothing came up. Someone scrubbed the records, replaced your authorship with Vortex Engineering Team, made you disappear. Smart move. Team ownership means company ownership. No royalties, no profit sharing. My father would never have allowed that." "Your father was dying. I don't think he knew." Victoria's face hardened. "Donald, probably, but I cannot prove it, and after 6 years I don't care enough to try." "You should care. You built this engine. You deserve credit, compensation, recognition." Ryan laughed, and it came out bitter. "I deserve to watch my daughter grow up. That's all I deserve. That's all I want." "Then why are you here?" Because in 2 days, someone's going to drive that engine at race speeds in weather that's forecasted to be 90 degrees. And if you don't fix the cooling system flaw, they're going to die. And I can't live with that, even if I can live with everything else." Victoria set down the tablet. "Show me." They spent the next 3 hours going through the technical details. Ryan explained the flaw using the equipment still scattered around the workshop. Old tools, salvaged parts, a whiteboard with faded calculations from years ago. Victoria asked questions. Good questions. The kind that showed she understood engineering at a deeper level than he'd expected. "You studied mechanical engineering," Ryan said. "MIT? Stanford, my father insisted. Said I needed to understand the work, not just the business." Victoria erased a calculation and rewrote it. "He was right. But it doesn't matter how much I understand if the people around me won't listen. They'll listen if you make them. Like you did? By disappearing?" The words hung between them. Ryan looked at this woman, this CEO, this daughter, this person trying to fill shoes that might actually fit if everyone would stop telling her they wouldn't, and felt something shift. "I didn't disappear," he said quietly. "I evolved, became someone different. Someone smaller, but more important. I stopped mattering to thousands of people I'd never meet and started mattering everything to one person I'd die for. Lily." "Yeah." Victoria's expression softened. "I'm not going to pretend I understand that choice. I don't have kids. I barely have a life outside this company, but I respect it. The sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice if you love them more than you love the alternative." They worked until 9 p.m. By then, Ryan had walked Victoria through every modification needed to fix the cooling flaw. She'd taken notes, asked follow-ups, challenged his assumptions with the kind of technical rigor that reminded him why he'd loved this work in the first place. "I can have the engineering team implement this tonight," Victoria said. "We'll work through until the race if we have to." "Donald won't let you. He'll say it's too risky to modify a working engine this close to the race." "Donald doesn't decide. He will if he convinces the board you're making emotional decisions based on the advice of a maintenance worker." Victoria's jaw set. "Then I won't tell him it came from you." "He'll figure it out. Men like him always do." "Let him. I'm tired of playing politics while the actual work suffers." She started gathering her things. "Come to the workshop tomorrow, 6 a.m. I want you there when we implement the fixes." "I can't. I have to get Lily to school." "So come after, 8 a.m. Please. I need someone there who actually understands this engine." Ryan wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the boundary between his two lives. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. He wanted to say yes, wanted to be part of building something that mattered again, wanted to be seen as someone who knew things, who could help, who existed as more than background noise. "Okay," he said, 8 a.m., but this is temporary. After the race, I go back to maintenance, back to invisible." Victoria looked at him with something that might have been pity or understanding or both. You were never invisible, Ryan. You just convinced yourself you were. She left first. Ryan stayed in the old workshop for another hour, walking through the space where he'd spent the best and worst years of his life, where he'd built dreams, where he'd gotten the phone call about Sarah's accident, where he'd made the choice to walk away from everything except the one thing that mattered most. When he finally left, locking the door behind him, Ryan realized he'd crossed a line tonight that he couldn't uncross. He'd let Victoria see him, really see him, and once someone saw you, you couldn't go back to being invisible. The question was whether being seen would save them or destroy everything he'd built in the shadows. He picked up Lily from Mrs. Park's apartment. She was already asleep. Mrs. Park had let her watch a Korean drama while eating rice cakes, and Lily had crashed on the couch surrounded by throw pillows. Ryan carried his daughter up the stairs to their apartment, feeling the familiar weight of her in his arms. 6 years old, growing so fast. Soon she'd be too big to carry. Soon she'd have questions he couldn't answer. Soon the world would tell her that her father was nobody special, just a maintenance worker in a building full of important people. He wondered what she'd think if she knew the truth, if she'd be proud or confused or angry that he'd hidden himself away. Tomorrow he'd find out if Victoria Vaughn was the leader her father believed she could be. If she'd stand up to Donald Sterling and the board and everyone else who'd spent years telling her she wasn't enough. And Ryan would stand in that workshop at 8 a.m., no longer invisible, no longer hiding, and hope like hell he hadn't just destroyed the quiet life that had saved them both. Ryan arrived at Workshop C7 at exactly 8 a.m. carrying 2 coffees from the gas station down the street, the cheap kind that tasted like burnt regret but had enough caffeine to power through what he suspected would be a very long day. He dropped Lily at school early, watching her run toward the playground in her light-up sneakers, completely unaware that her father was about to step back into a world he'd spent 6 years pretending didn't exist. The workshop floor was already chaos. Engineers clustered around the GT7 in tight groups, their voices sharp with disagreement. Someone had wheeled in 3 diagnostic computers. Technical drawings covered every available surface. And standing in the middle of it all, Victoria Vaughn looked like she was about 10 seconds away from firing everyone in the room. No, she was saying to a senior engineer Ryan recognized as Thomas Bradshaw, 40-something MIT credentials, the kind of confident arrogance that came from being right 80% of the time and never remembering the other 20. We're not running another simulation. We're implementing the modifications. With respect, Ms. Vaughn, you're asking us to overhaul a critical cooling system 36 hours before the championship race based on theoretical failure analysis from documentation that's a decade old, based on failure analysis that predicted the exact problem we spent 11 days trying to solve. That was a sensor issue. This is completely different. Is it? Or is it part of the same fundamental misunderstanding of how this engine actually works? Thomas's face reddened. I've been engineering race systems for 15 years. Then you should know better than to ignore a catastrophic failure warning just because it's inconvenient timing. Ryan stood in the doorway, watching the fight escalate. Marcus Chen noticed him first, did a double take, then walked over with an expression somewhere between confused and suspicious. You're here, Marcus said. Apparently. Victoria called this meeting at 6 a.m., told us we had critical modifications to implement. Wouldn't say where the intel came from. Marcus studied Ryan's face. But I'm guessing you know. I know she's right. About thermal cascade failure under sustained racing load? Come on, man. We've run this engine at test speeds for hundreds of hours. If there was a critical flaw, we'd have seen it. Not at race speeds, not in 90-degree weather, not with the specific modifications your team made to the cooling brackets 3 years ago. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Victoria's voice cut across the workshop. Ryan, good. You're here. She waved him over, ignoring the sudden silence that fell across the room. Explain to Thomas why his simulation parameters are wrong. Every engineer in the room turned to stare. Ryan felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. He saw the confusion on their faces. Why was the maintenance guy being consulted on engineering decisions? He saw the moment some of them recognized him from the hallways, from the break room, from the background of their important lives. Thomas Bradshaw looked at Ryan like he was something stuck to his shoe. I'm sorry, who are you? He's the person who fixed the sensor problem you couldn't solve. Victoria said. And he's the person who designed this engine in the first place. The silence got heavier. Ryan wanted to disappear into the floor. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was supposed to consult quietly, stay in the background, help Victoria implement the fix without making himself the center of attention. That's insane, Thomas said. The GT7 was designed by the Vortex engineering team under the direction of... He stopped, face going pale. Wait. R. Cole. The documentation signature, but that's impossible. R. Cole left the company years ago. R. Cole never left, Victoria said. He just stopped being visible. Ryan set down the coffee cups and walked toward the engine, trying to ignore the stares burning into his back. The GT7 sat on its mount like a patient waiting for surgery. He could see what they'd done to it over the years, the small modifications, the improvements that had actually introduced instability, the ways they'd optimized for performance without understanding the underlying architecture. Your simulation is using the wrong ambient temperature parameters, Ryan said quietly. You're testing at 72 degrees because that's standard lab conditions. But race day is forecasted at 92. That 20-degree difference changes the thermal dynamics completely. We account for temperature variance, Thomas said. It's built into the model. You account for it in the coolant system, but you're not accounting for how the modified bracket design distributes heat differently than my original specs. At higher ambient temps, the brackets themselves become heat conductors instead of insulators. Creates a feedback loop. Show me. Ryan picked up a marker and walked to the nearest whiteboard. His hand hesitated for just a second before muscle memory took over. He started writing equations, sketching thermal distribution diagrams, mapping out the cascade failure sequence exactly as he'd documented it 10 years ago. The engineers gathered around, watching. Ryan could feel their skepticism shifting to interest, then to concern, as the math revealed itself. The coolant system will handle normal operating temps fine, Ryan continued, but at sustained speeds above 240 in 90-plus degree weather, the heat load on these brackets exceeds their dissipation capacity. System starts cooking itself from the inside. Takes about 12 minutes of sustained racing before failure. Driver gets maybe 2 seconds warning. Jesus, Marcus breathed. That's halfway through the championship race, give or take. Depends on the driver's line, how hard they push the engine, exact weather conditions. Could be sooner, could be later, but it'll happen. Thomas had gone very quiet, studying Ryan's calculations with the intensity of someone watching their assumptions crumble. If this is accurate, and I'm not saying it is, but why didn't anyone catch it before now? Someone did, Victoria said. Ryan warned about it in his original documentation. Page 63, Appendix C. The warning got buried when someone scrubbed his name from the engineering records and claimed team authorship. Who would do that? That's not important right now, Victoria said, though her expression suggested she knew exactly who. What's important is fixing it before race day. We'd need to replace the brackets with original spec components, recalibrate the entire cooling system and run validation tests, Thomas said, doing the mental math. That's at least 48 hours of work, and we have 36 hours until the race. Then we work through the night. Ms. Vaughn, with respect, this is an enormous risk. If something goes wrong during implementation, we won't have time to recover. We could show up to the championship with a non-functional engine, and if we don't implement it and the engine fails mid-race, we show up to a funeral. Victoria's voice went hard. I'm not asking for opinions here. I'm telling you what we're doing. Ryan will supervise the modifications. You'll assist him. Thomas looked like he'd been slapped. You want a maintenance worker supervising senior engineers? I want the person who designed this engine supervising people who've been modifying it without understanding the underlying architecture. If that hurts your ego, Thomas, you're welcome to sit this one out. My ego isn't the issue. Then prove it. Help us fix this, or get out of the way. The standoff lasted maybe 5 seconds before Thomas broke eye contact. Fine, but if this backfires, it's on record that I objected. Noted. Victoria turned to Ryan. What do you need? Ryan looked at the engine, at the gathered engineers, at the massive amount of work standing between them and a safe race. Original cooling bracket specs. I don't know if you still have the fabrication molds. We do. They're in archive storage. Raw materials, titanium aluminum alloy, specific grade, not the cheap stuff your current supplier uses. I'll authorize whatever procurement needs. And I need everyone in this room to forget I'm maintenance and remember I know this machine better than they know their own names. No second guessing, no ego trips. If we're doing this, we're doing it my way. Victoria smiled slightly. Hear that? His way. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Ryan could see the resentment on some faces, the curiosity on others. Marcus looked like he was watching a ghost perform an exorcism, but nobody argued. Good, Victoria said. Get to work. The next 30 hours became a blur of metal shavings, recalibration sequences, and coffee that tasted progressively worse as exhaustion set in. Ryan fell into a rhythm he'd forgotten existed, the flow state of engineering where time stopped meaning anything, and the only thing that mattered was making the machine perfect. He worked alongside people who'd been strangers yesterday and were reluctant collaborators today. Marcus turned out to be better than Ryan remembered, willing to admit when he didn't understand something instead of pretending competence. Thomas remained prickly, but competent, his ego slowly deflating as he realized how much he'd been working with incomplete information. Around 2 a.m., during a break while they waited for the fabrication shop to finish machining new brackets, Marcus sat down next to Ryan with 2 energy drinks and a question. Why'd you really come back? Ryan cracked open the energy drink. It tasted like carbonated medicine. To fix the engine. Bullshit. You could have sent an anonymous tip. Could have stayed invisible. Instead, you're here, in the middle of everything, supervising modifications under your real name. That's not fixing an engine. That's something else. Ryan thought about lying, thought about deflecting, but exhaustion made honesty easier than deception. I spent 6 years being nobody, he said. Thought that's what I wanted. Thought that's what Lily needed. A dad who was just a dad, nothing more. But standing in that workshop yesterday explaining thermodynamics to Victoria, I remembered what it felt like to be good at something, to matter in ways that went beyond paying rent and packing lunches. So you missed it. Yeah, I missed it. And I hate that I missed it, because missing it means I wasn't as okay with being nobody as I pretended to be. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Sarah would have wanted you to be happy. Ryan's throat tightened. Sarah would have wanted me to be a good father. Maybe you can be both. Not in my experience. Then maybe your experience is incomplete. Marcus stood up, stretched. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're back. Even if it's temporary. Even if you disappear again after this. The work is better with you in it. He walked away before Ryan could respond. Ryan sat there in the quiet workshop, surrounded by tools and half-assembled engine components, and let himself feel the complicated mess of emotions he'd been shoving down for years. The grief that never quite healed, the anger at a world that took Sarah and left him to figure out parenthood alone. The guilt of enjoying this work when he was supposed to be home with his daughter. The fear that he'd already crossed a line he couldn't uncross. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Park. Lily asking about you. Told her you working late. She made you drawing. Very beautiful. Attached was a photo of construction paper covered in crayon. Lily had drawn 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a sun that took up half the page. Above them, in her careful first-grade handwriting, "My dad is the best." Ryan stared at the image until his vision blurred. Then he saved it, put his phone away, and got back to work. The brackets were ready by 4 a.m. Installation took another 6 hours. By 10 a.m., 26 hours before race start, the modified cooling system was complete. They ran diagnostic after diagnostic, stress test after stress test. Everything came back perfect. It works, Thomas said, and he sounded almost disappointed that his objections had been wrong. Thermal distribution is optimal. Failure risk is essentially 0. Run it again, Ryan said. We've run it 6 times. Run it again. They ran it again. And again. By noon, even Thomas admitted they'd done everything possible. The engine was ready, the system was safe. Nobody was going to die on race day because of a preventable failure. Victoria found Ryan in the break room around 2 p.m., slumped in a plastic chair and staring at nothing. She looked as exhausted as he felt, her hair escaping its professional bun, dark circles under her eyes, coffee stains on her shirt. You should go home, she said. Get some sleep before the race tomorrow. You should too. I will, after I deal with Donald. Ryan looked up. He found out? He's been calling every 30 minutes since midnight. Wants to know why we modified a working engine against his explicit advice. Wants to know who authorized the changes. Wants to know why a maintenance worker is suddenly supervising senior engineers. What did you tell him? The truth. That I made an executive decision based on critical safety information. That the modifications are complete and successful. That he can file whatever objections he wants with the board, but the engine stays as is. He's going to come after you. Let him try. Victoria sat down across from Ryan, her exhaustion momentarily replaced by something harder. I spent the last year being afraid of him, afraid of the board, afraid of making the wrong decision and proving everyone right who said I was too young, too inexperienced, too much of a daughter instead of a CEO. But you know what? I'm tired of being afraid. My father built this company on good engineering and honest work. If I lose it defending those principles, at least I lose it being the leader he raised me to be. Ryan felt something shift in his chest. He'd be proud of you. I hope so, because I fired Donald an hour ago. The words hung in the air like a detonation. Ryan stared at her. You what? I fired him, effective immediately. Had security escort him out of the building. He's threatening lawsuits, of course. Probably will get some board members on his side, but I found evidence he's been skimming contract payments for years, buried in old accounting records. Enough evidence to make his threats look stupid if he pushes too hard. Victoria, he stole your work, Ryan, erased your name from the records, claimed company ownership of designs you created so he could build his reputation on your brilliance. Then he tried to fire you to cover up the evidence. That's not just wrong. It's theft. And I won't have thieves running my father's company. Ryan didn't know what to say. Part of him felt vindicated. Part of him felt terrified. Firing Donald Sterling meant war, the kind of corporate battle that destroyed careers and companies. You didn't have to do that, he said finally. Yes, I did. Because if I didn't, I'd be just another executive protecting corruption to maintain stability. I'd be everything I hate about this industry. Victoria leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking very young and very tired. Besides, you saved lives today. The least I could do was make sure the person responsible actually faced consequences. You're going to lose board support. Probably, but I'll sleep better. They sat in silence for a while, two exhausted people who'd spent the last 30 hours fighting different battles in the same war. Outside the break room window, Ryan could see the main workshop floor winding down. Engineers heading home to sleep before the race, equipment being cleaned and stored. The normal rhythm of a company preparing for its biggest day of the year. What happens after tomorrow, Ryan asked. After the race? Yeah, assuming we win, assuming the engine performs perfectly and nobody dies and Donald's gone and everything's supposed to go back to normal. What happens to me? Victoria looked at him for a long moment. What do you want to happen? I don't know. 2 days ago, I wanted to stay invisible, keep my head down, raise my kid. But now? He trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. Now you remember who you used to be. Now I remember there was a version of me who did important work and made things that mattered. And I don't know if I can go back to pretending that version never existed. So don't pretend. It's not that simple. I have a daughter. I have responsibilities. I can't just decide to be someone different because I had a nice couple of days remembering my glory years. I'm not asking you to be someone different. I'm asking if you want to be yourself again. Victoria stood up, straightened her ruined shirt. Go home, Ryan. Sleep. Watch your daughter's dance recital or soccer game or whatever 6-year-olds do. Come to the race tomorrow, and then we'll talk about what comes next. She left. Ryan sat alone in the break room, staring at the crumbs from someone's lunch and the coffee rings on the table and thinking about versions of himself. Past, present, future. The brilliant 21-year-old who'd designed engines that changed motorsport. The broken widower who'd walked away from everything to raise his daughter alone. The 32-year-old maintenance worker who'd spent 6 years being invisible. And maybe, possibly, the person he could become if he stopped choosing between being a father and being himself. His phone rang. Unknown number again. Ryan almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Is this Ryan Cole? A woman's voice, professional, sharp. Depends on who's asking. My name is Jennifer Marks. I'm a journalist with Motorsport Weekly. I'm investigating allegations of engineering fraud at Vortex Motorsport, and I was told you might have information. Ryan's blood went cold. Who told you that? I can't reveal my sources, but I've obtained documentation suggesting that major design work was improperly attributed to corporate teams instead of individual engineers, specifically regarding the GT7 engine. Would you be willing to comment? No? Mr. Cole, if you're a victim of intellectual property theft, I'm not a victim of anything, and I have nothing to say. What if I told you my source claims you're the actual designer of the GT7? That your work was stolen and buried by company executives? Ryan felt sick. This had Donald's fingerprints all over it. One final scorched earth move on his way out. Feed the story to a journalist. Let the scandal destroy Victoria's credibility even if it didn't save his job. My source also provided documentation, Jennifer continued. Original blueprint signed R. Cole. Internal emails discussing authorship changes. This is going to be a story either way, Mr. Cole. The question is whether you want your voice included. My voice says leave me alone. Is it true that you're currently working as maintenance staff at Vortex despite being the GT7's principal designer? Ryan hung up, immediately called Victoria. She answered on the first ring, sounding alert despite the exhaustion. Journalists just called me, Ryan said without preamble, asking about the GT7 authorship, has documentation, knows my name. This is Donald's doing. Victoria swore quietly. He's trying to burn everything down on his way out. It's going to become a story. Companies stealing engineers' work, covering it up for years. You firing the COO right before the championship. It's going to look like chaos. Let it look like chaos. The truth is the truth. The truth is complicated. And the press doesn't do complicated. They do scandals. So what do you want me to do? Give Donald his job back? Pretend none of this happened? I want you to think about what happens when this story breaks. Your board will panic. Sponsors will ask questions. Competitors will smell blood in the water. You could lose everything you're trying to build. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Is that what you're worried about? Or are you worried about Lily reading news articles about her dad? The question hit harder than Ryan expected. Because yes, that was exactly what he was worried about. Lily finding out through strangers and headlines instead of from him. Lily asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Lily's safe, simple world crumbling because her father's past had finally caught up with them. Both, he admitted. Then we tell the story our way, before the journalist does. We control the narrative. How? Tomorrow, at the race, in front of everyone. We acknowledge what happened. We restore your credit publicly. We turn the scandal into a redemption story. That'll destroy what's left of my anonymity. Yes. Lily will find out. The other kids at school, their parents, everyone will know. Yes. Victoria, I know what I'm asking. I know it's not fair, but the alternative is letting Donald's version of events become the official record. Is that what you want? Ryan closed his eyes. Thought about Lily's drawing, about being the best dad, about what that actually meant, protecting her from everything, or showing her that the truth mattered even when it was hard. I need to think about it, he said. You have until tomorrow. Race starts at 2 p.m. If you're there, I'll assume you're ready. If you're not, I'll handle it alone. She hung up. Ryan sat in his truck in the Vortex parking lot, watching employees stream out of the building. Normal people going home to normal lives. He'd wanted to be one of them so badly, had worked so hard to disappear into normalcy. Now normal was being ripped away whether he wanted it or not. He drove home. Mrs. Park met him at the door with Lily, who launched herself at his legs with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't seen him in years instead of hours. Daddy? Mrs. Park taught me to make kimchi. Well, not real kimchi because that takes days, but quick kimchi, and it was spicy but good, and I helped cut the cabbage with the special kid scissors, and Ryan scooped her up, buried his face in her hair that smelled like Mrs. Park's kitchen and children's shampoo and everything good in his life. Sounds like you had a better day than me. Mrs. Park says you're doing important work. Mrs. Park talks too much. Mrs. Park smiled from the doorway. Mrs. Park knows things. You look tired. I am tired. You look worried too. Ryan set Lily down. Why don't you go wash up for dinner, sweetheart? Lily ran off. Mrs. Park studied Ryan's face with the kind of perception that came from 7 decades of watching people lie to themselves. Something changed, she said, and everything changed. Is this good change or bad change? I don't know yet. Mrs. Park reached out and patted his shoulder with surprising strength. Sarah would tell you to choose happiness, choose truth, choose the life that lets you sleep at night. How do you know what Sarah would say? You never met her. I know because you loved her. And people who love like you loved don't choose people who want them to hide. Mrs. Park headed toward the stairs. Also, there is kimchi in your refrigerator. Lily made extra. It is very ugly kimchi, but eat it anyway. She will ask. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with a container of his daughter's terrible, beautiful kimchi, and the drawing she'd made of them holding hands under an oversized sun. He thought about the race tomorrow, about Victoria's offer to go public, about Jennifer Marks and her article that was going to happen regardless of what he did. He thought about the different versions of himself and whether any of them were complete without the others. The engineer, the father, the widow, the maintenance worker, the ghost haunting his own life. Around midnight, Ryan opened his laptop and started writing. Not calculations this time, not technical documentation, just words. A letter to Lily that she was too young to read now, but might need someday when she was old enough to understand that her father was complicated and broken and trying his best. He wrote about Sarah, about the choice he'd made after she died, about why he'd hidden himself away, and whether that had been brave or cowardly or both. About the GT7 and the work he'd loved and lost. About coming back. About remembering who he used to be and trying to figure out who he wanted to become. He wrote until his coffee went cold and his eyes burned and the words stopped coming. Then he saved the file, closed the laptop, and made a decision. The race was at 2 p.m. Ryan would be there, not hiding in the background, not pretending to be nobody, but standing in the place he'd earned 10 years ago and reclaimed in the last 30 hours. Whatever came next, he'd face it as himself, completely, for the first time in 6 years. He just hoped it would be enough. Ryan woke up at 6 a.m. to find Lily already awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with her toy cars arranged in what she claimed was a very important race. She'd lined them up by color instead of speed, which seemed like flawed methodology, but Ryan kept that opinion to himself. "Morning, sweetheart." "Daddy, the red car is going to win because red is the fastest color. Everyone knows that." "What about the blue car?" Lily considered this seriously. "Blue is second fastest, but red always wins in movies." Ryan made scrambled eggs while Lily provided commentary on her imaginary race, complete with sound effects and dramatic crashes. It was so normal, so perfectly ordinary, that Ryan felt the weight of what he was about to do settle even heavier on his shoulders. After breakfast, while Lily was getting dressed, his phone rang. "Victoria." "Change of plans," she said without greeting. "Donald's going nuclear. He leaked everything to 3 different outlets overnight. The story's breaking this morning." Ryan's stomach dropped. "How bad?" "Bad. They're running it as motorsport giant caught in engineering fraud scandal. They've got quotes from anonymous engineers claiming systematic credit theft. They've got the original blueprints with your signature. They've got everything except your side of the story." "Christ." "Press conference is at 11. Race is still at 2. I need you there for both." "Victoria, I haven't even told Lily yet." "Then tell her. But do it fast because by lunch, every news outlet in the country is going to be running your name and face. Better she hears it from you first." The line went dead. Ryan stood in his kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to his daughter sing off-key in the bathroom while she brushed her teeth. 6 years old. Still believed in the tooth fairy and thought her dad was the best person in the world. In about 4 hours, that simple truth was going to get complicated in ways he couldn't protect her from. He called Mrs. Park. She agreed to take Lily for the day without asking questions, though her silence on the other end of the phone suggested she'd already guessed something was coming. "Lily?" Ryan called. "Come here for a minute." She appeared in her favorite purple shirt with a dinosaur on it, toothpaste still on her chin. Ryan wiped it off with his thumb, buying himself a few more seconds before the conversation he'd been dreading. "You know how sometimes Daddy has to work late? How sometimes I'm gone when you wake up?" Lily nodded. "Mrs. Park says you're fixing important things." "Yeah. Well, the thing I've been fixing is really important, and today some people are going to want to talk about it. About me. About the work I used to do before you were born." "What kind of work?" "I built race car engines. Really fast ones. The fastest in the world, actually." Lily's eyes went wide. Like the red car that always wins? Sort of, but I stopped doing that work when Mommy died because I wanted to stay home with you more. Wanted to be the kind of dad who was always around. You are always around. I try to be, but today I have to go somewhere. There's going to be a big race, and the engine I helped fix is going to run in it, and some people are going to ask me questions about it. Questions about why I stopped building engines and started mopping floors. Lily frowned, processing this. Did you do something bad? No, sweetheart, I didn't do anything bad. But some people think I should have kept doing the important work instead of choosing to be with you. They don't understand why I picked being your dad over being famous. Being my dad is more important than being famous. Ryan felt something crack in his chest. Yeah, baby, it is. But not everyone gets that. He sent her to Mrs. Parks with her backpack full of toys and snacks, watching from the window as the old woman took Lily's hand and led her away. Mrs. Park looked back once, gave Ryan a small nod that somehow conveyed both support and warning, then disappeared into her apartment. Ryan stood alone in his quiet kitchen and let himself feel the full weight of what was coming. Then he put on his only suit, bought from Goodwill 3 years ago for a parent-teacher conference he'd thought required formal wear, and drove to Vortex headquarters. The parking lot was already packed with news vans. Reporters clustered around the main entrance like sharks smelling blood. Ryan slipped in through the service entrance, taking the maintenance corridors he knew better than the public hallways, and made it to Victoria's office without being spotted. She was standing at her window again, but this time her posture wasn't defeated. She looked like she was preparing for battle. You came, she said. Didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. You could have run, disappeared again, changed your name, moved to another city, started over. Thought about it, but then I'd be teaching Lily that the truth only matters when it's convenient. Ryan joined her at the window. The parking lot below looked like a media circus. Besides, running didn't work the first time, just delayed this conversation by 6 years. Victoria turned to face him. She'd armored herself in a sharp suit and perfect makeup, but Ryan could see the exhaustion underneath. Donald's claiming I'm using you to cover up my own incompetence. Says I'm manufacturing a scandal to distract from the company's financial problems. Are there financial problems? There are now. 3 sponsors pulled out this morning. Board members are calling for my resignation. Stock price is tanking. She smiled without humor. Apparently burning down your COO has consequences. You could still fix this. Put out a statement saying I'm disgruntled, that Donald was right, that you were misled by a maintenance worker with delusions of grandeur. Is that what you want? No, but it's the smart play. I'm done making the smart play. Smart got me a company full of corruption and engineers working from incomplete documentation because someone decided profit mattered more than truth. Victoria checked her watch. Press conference is in 30 minutes. Legal team wants me to read a prepared statement and take no questions. PR team wants me to apologize for the confusion and promise an internal investigation. My father's old attorney wants me to sue Donald into oblivion and worry about public perception later. What do you want? I want to stand up there and tell the truth. I want to acknowledge that you designed the GT7, that your work was stolen, that I fired the person responsible and I'd do it again. She met his eyes. But I can't do that without your permission. This is your story too. Ryan thought about Lily, about the drawing on his refrigerator, about the letter he'd written last night that his daughter might read someday when she was old enough to understand that her father had been scared but did the right thing anyway. Tell the truth, he said. All of it. The press room was packed beyond capacity. Ryan stood backstage with Victoria, listening to the murmur of reporters and the clicking of cameras, and feeling like he was about to step off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. Marcus appeared from somewhere, carrying 2 bottles of water and looking worried. You don't have to do this. Victoria can handle the questions. You can stay back here. If I stay back here, I'm still hiding. Hiding kept you safe for 6 years. Safe and honest aren't always the same thing. Ryan took one of the water bottles. How's the engine? Perfect. We ran final diagnostics this morning. Everything's optimal. Your modifications are holding beautifully. Good. That's something at least. Victoria's assistant appeared, made some signal Ryan didn't understand. Victoria nodded, then turned to him. Last chance to run. I'm done running. They walked out together. The camera flashes were immediate and blinding. Ryan had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at by hundreds of people simultaneously, all of them wanting something from him. Answers, scandal, blood. Victoria stepped up to the podium. Ryan stood slightly behind and to the left, the position usually reserved for vice presidents and other people who mattered. He could see reporters doing double takes, trying to place him, whispering to each other. "Thank you for coming," Victoria began. Her voice was steady, controlled. "I'm going to make a statement, and then I'll take questions. 2 days ago, I became aware of serious irregularities in Vortex Motorsports engineering documentation, specifically regarding the GT7 engine that will compete in today's championship race." The murmuring got louder. Cameras turned from Victoria to Ryan and back again. The GT7 was designed 10 years ago by Ryan Cole, who was at that time our chief design engineer and one of the most talented automotive engineers in the industry. Mr. Cole's authorship was subsequently erased from company records by senior executives who claimed corporate team credit for his individual work. This was done without his knowledge or consent, and it constituted theft of intellectual property. Someone shouted a question. Victoria ignored it. Mr. Cole left Vortex 6 years ago after the death of his wife. He returned 2 years ago under an assumed employment status to ensure the safety and integrity of the engine he designed. When our senior engineering team was unable to solve a critical system failure, Mr. Cole repaired it. When he discovered a potentially fatal flaw in the modified design, he warned me, and when I asked him to help implement safety modifications, he did so while asking for nothing in return. Victoria paused, looked directly at the cameras. "Yesterday, I terminated COO Donald Sterling for his role in the documentation fraud and for his attempts to suppress this information. I expect he will dispute this termination. I expect there will be legal challenges. I expect some of you will write stories suggesting I'm incompetent or reckless, or making emotional decisions. But the truth is simple. This company was built on brilliant engineering and honest work, and I refuse to let it continue on theft and corruption." She stepped back from the podium. "Mr. Cole will now answer your questions." Ryan's mouth went dry. This wasn't what they discussed. Victoria was supposed to field the questions, supposed to protect him from the worst of it. But she was looking at him with an expression that said she knew exactly what she was doing, throwing him into the deep end because treading water wasn't the same as swimming. He stepped forward. The cameras focused. Someone called out, "Mr. Cole, why did you return to Vortex in a maintenance position instead of reclaiming your original role?" Ryan's hands gripped the podium. "I had a 6-year-old daughter to raise. Maintenance work meant regular hours and no travel. It meant I could be home every night. But you were living in poverty while the company made billions from your designs. Didn't you feel cheated?" "I felt like I was making the choice my daughter needed me to make. Money doesn't matter much when you're trying to figure out how to explain death to a kid who still believes in magic." Another reporter. "Did you know your work had been stolen?" "I suspected. Didn't have proof. Didn't really care enough to fight about it. I was done with that part of my life." "So why come back now? Why fix the engine if you were done?" Ryan paused. This was the question that mattered, the one that would determine how the story got told. "Because someone would have died if I didn't. The modified design had a flaw that wouldn't show up until race conditions. I wrote warnings about it 10 years ago, but those warnings got buried along with my name. So I came back to fix it. Not for credit, not for recognition, just to make sure a driver didn't die from a preventable failure." "That's quite heroic," someone called out, and there was skepticism in the voice. "Convenient timing, though. Right before the championship, right when Ms. Vaughn is facing pressure from the board. There's nothing convenient about any of this. I wanted to stay invisible. Ms. Vaughn is the one who insisted on telling the truth." "Ms. Vaughn, is it true 3 sponsors have pulled their support?" Victoria leaned into her microphone. "Yes." "Is the company in financial trouble?" "We're having a challenging quarter, but we've had challenging quarters before. We'll survive." "What about the board? Sources say they're preparing to vote you out." "The board will do what the board does. I'll keep doing what I think is right." A woman in the front row stood up. Jennifer Marks. Ryan recognized her voice from the phone call yesterday. "Mr. Cole, I've spoken to former Vortex employees who claim the company has a pattern of claiming individual work as corporate property. Did you witness other instances of this practice?" Ryan glanced at Victoria. She gave a small nod. Yes, I saw designers get credited as teams. Saw innovations get attributed to departments instead of people. It's standard practice in a lot of corporations. Protects the company's intellectual property rights. Makes it harder for employees to leave and take their knowledge with them. But in your case, it went further. Your name was actively scrubbed from the records. That part wasn't standard. That was personal. Personal how? Ryan thought about Donald Sterling, about the ways ambitious men eliminated competition, about the choice to say it out loud or let it stay buried. The person responsible saw me as a threat, saw my relationship with the former CEO as something that could block his advancement. When I left, he took the opportunity to erase me and claim my legacy as corporate achievement. The questions kept coming about the technical details of the engine, about the modifications they'd made, about whether the race should be postponed for further safety testing, about Victoria's leadership and Ryan's intentions, and whether this was all a publicity stunt or corporate sabotage or legitimate whistleblowing. Ryan answered them as honestly as he could, which meant admitting uncertainty more often than claiming authority. It wasn't the polished performance of someone used to press conferences. It was messy and human and probably gave the communications team heart attacks. But it was true. After 45 minutes, Victoria called it. That's all the time we have. The race begins in 3 hours. We have work to do. They escaped backstage to a chorus of shouted follow-ups. Ryan's hands were shaking. Victoria looked pale but determined. That was a disaster, her PR director said. Dad, appearing from nowhere with a tablet full of what were probably terrible social media reactions. That was honest, Victoria corrected. There's a difference. Honest doesn't pay the bills when sponsors are fleeing. Then we'll find new sponsors. Ones who care about integrity? The PR director looked like she wanted to argue, but thought better of it. She disappeared, muttering into her phone about damage control. Marcus found them in the hallway. Engines loaded. Transport team is heading to the track. We need to leave in 30 minutes if we want to be there for setup. Good. Victoria checked her phone, frowned. Ryan, you should know, the story's everywhere. Every major outlet, your name, your photo, everything. Ryan's stomach turned. Lily. I had someone checking social media. Some of it's supportive. Some of it's calling you a fraud. Some of it's conspiracy theories about you and me having an affair, and this being an elaborate cover story. Jesus Christ. The internet is a sewer. Try not to read the comments. Victoria put a hand on his shoulder. But your daughter will hear things. At school. From other parents. You need to be prepared for that. Ryan pulled out his phone. Texted Mrs. Park. Keep Lily inside today. Don't let her watch TV or use the computer. I'll explain later. The response came immediately. Already done. She is making more kimchi, very ugly kimchi. We are fine. The track was 2 hours outside the city, a sprawling complex that could hold 80,000 spectators and had hosted championship races for 20 years. Ryan had been here once before, the first time the GT7 had competed. He'd stood in the pit watching his engine perform exactly as he designed it, feeling pride so intense it had physically hurt. Now he stood in the same pit, watching mechanics make final adjustments, and felt nothing but dread. The grandstands were filling up. 70,000 people, maybe more, all of them here to watch drivers risk their lives at 200 miles per hour. Some of them had probably read the morning's news. Some probably thought he was a hero. Some probably thought he was a liar. Most probably didn't care as long as the race was exciting. Their driver was a 26-year-old Brazilian named Carlos Mendes, talented but inconsistent, fast but reckless. Ryan watched him climb into the cockpit, watched the crew run through final checks, and thought about Sarah, about the phone call from the hospital, about how fast everything could change. You okay? Marcus asked. No. Yeah, me neither. Marcus handed him a radio headset. Thought you might want to monitor the engine data. Old time's sake. Ryan took the headset, put it on. Immediately heard the chatter of the crew, tire pressure, fuel loads, track temperature. The language of racing that he'd once spoken fluently and had almost forgotten. Victoria appeared, having changed into Vortex team gear. She looked more comfortable in the racing jacket than she had in her CEO suit, which probably said something about what she actually loved about this job. Press is still circling, she said, but security's keeping them contained. We should be able to run the race without interference. Should be? Nothing's guaranteed anymore. She looked at the track, at the other teams preparing their cars. Donald's here, by the way, in the VIP section, brought his lawyer and half the board members who support him. They're watching, waiting for us to fail. What happens if we do fail?
Then I probably lose my job and you go back to being maintenance. But at least we'll fail honestly. The race director's voice came over the loudspeaker announcing 30 minutes to start. The crowd noise increased. Ryan felt his heart rate pick up, the old pre-race anxiety returning like it had never left. Carlos came over, helmet under his arm, looking young and scared under his professional confidence. Mr. Cole, I just wanted to say, whatever happens out there, I trust this engine. I trust your work. You shouldn't trust it blindly. Watch your temperatures. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you come in. Pride isn't worth dying for. I know, my engineer gave me the same speech. Carlos smiled slightly. But it means more coming from you, from the person who built it. He walked away. Ryan watched him go and thought about responsibility, about the weight of other people's lives resting on your calculations and choices, about how that weight never really went away, even when you tried to put it down. The cars lined up on the grid. Ryan moved to the pit wall with the rest of the team, his headset crackling with data updates. Engine temperatures nominal, all systems green. The GT7 sat in fourth position, chrome and carbon fiber, and 10 years of Ryan's life distilled into a machine that either worked or didn't. The starting lights began their sequence. 5 red lights, then 4, 3, 2, 1, green. The roar was immediate and overwhelming. 20 engines screaming to life simultaneously, tires clawing for grip, cars launching forward in a chaos of speed and engineering. Ryan watched the GT7 disappear into the pack, watched Carlos navigate the first turn cleanly, watched the data streams flowing across monitors showing everything was perfect. Lap 1, lap 5, lap 10. The race settled into a rhythm. Carlos was running a smart race, conserving his position, not taking stupid risks. The engine temperatures stayed optimal. The cooling system Ryan had rebuilt was performing exactly as designed. Around lap 15, Victoria appeared next to him. We're holding fourth. Good position for a late push. He shouldn't push, he should finish safe. This is racing. Safe doesn't win championships. Safe means he goes home to his family. Victoria looked at him. You really did leave the sport behind, didn't you? You forgot what it's about. I remember what it's about. I just stopped believing the glory was worth the risk. They watched in silence for several laps. Carlos moved up to third after the leader had a pit problem. The crowd was on its feet. Ryan's hands were sweating inside his gloves. Lap 23. The weather was exactly as forecasted. 92 degrees, clear sky, brutal sun beating down on the track. The exact conditions Ryan had warned about. The exact scenario that should have killed the driver if they hadn't made the modifications. He watched the temperature data obsessively. The cooling system was handling it. The brackets were distributing heat correctly. Everything was working. Lap 30. Halfway through the race. Carlos was running second now, pushing hard, closing the gap on the leader. Ryan's radio crackled with the crew chief urging more speed. Then the temperature spiked. It was small, 0.3 degrees above optimal, well within normal variance, but Ryan saw it and felt ice in his veins. You seen this? He said to Marcus. Marcus checked his monitor. It's nothing, normal fluctuation. Check the bracket sensors. Ryan, everything's fine. Check them. Marcus pulled up the data. Frowned. Slight elevation in bracket temperature, still within acceptable range. It shouldn't be elevated at all, not with the new design. Could be track conditions, could be Carlos's driving line, could be 1,000 things. Ryan grabbed the radio. Pit Carlos. Now. The crew chief's voice came back confused. Negative. All systems green. He's in second place. I don't care. Bring him in. Mr. Cole, with respect, we're not pitting a car in second position because of a 0.3 degree temperature variation. Victoria took the radio from Ryan's hand. This is Vaughn. Pit the car. Ma'am, we'll lose track position. Pit the damn car. That's an order. 30 seconds of argument. Then Carlos's voice, frustrated. What's the problem? Precautionary check. Come in this lap. Ryan watched Carlos peel off into the pit lane, watched other teams capitalize on the unscheduled stop, watched their championship position evaporate. The crew swarmed the car, ran diagnostics, checked every sensor. Everything came back normal. "See?" the crew chief said. "Nothing wrong. We just gave up second place for nothing." But Ryan was watching the bracket temperature data. It had dropped immediately when Carlos slowed down. Dropped faster than it should have if it was just ambient heat. "Pull the number 3 cooling bracket," Ryan said. "That'll take 15 minutes. We'll be out of the race." "Pull it!" They pulled it. Ryan took the bracket in his hands, still hot from the engine, and found the problem immediately. A microscopic stress fracture, exactly where he'd predicted one might form, beginning to propagate under race conditions. Another 10 laps and it would have failed completely. Would have triggered the cascade failure he'd warned about. Would have killed Carlos Mendez at 200 miles per hour. Marcus saw it too. Went pale. "Jesus, if we hadn't pitted..." "Install the backup bracket, the one from my original specs that we kept as insurance." They installed it, sent Carlos back out. He was running 8th now, championship hopes essentially dead but alive. Breathing. Going home to whatever family or friends or life he had outside this track. The race finished. They placed 7th. It was their worst finish in 3 years. The crowd that had been cheering went quiet with disappointment. In the VIP section, Ryan could see Donald Sterling talking animatedly to board members, probably explaining how this disaster proved Victoria's incompetence, probably pointing out that they'd pitted a car in second place based on the paranoid advice of a maintenance worker. Victoria stood next to Ryan on the pit wall, watching their competitors celebrate, her face unreadable. "I'm sorry," Ryan said. "For what?" "For costing you the championship, for making you look bad in front of the board, for saving our driver's life?" Victoria turned to look at him. "Ryan, in 10 laps that bracket would have failed. We'd be answering questions from race officials about why our engine killed someone. Instead, we're explaining why we made a conservative pit call. I'll take option 2. Donald's going to use this against you. Let him. At least he'll have to do it knowing we made the right choice." The media swarmed them immediately after the race. Questions about the pit strategy, about the 7th place finish, about whether the engine modifications had actually worked or if they'd created new problems. Ryan stood next to Victoria and explained the fracture, showed them the faulty bracket, walked them through exactly why the pit call had been necessary. Some reporters got it. Most just saw a championship lost and wanted someone to blame. By the time Ryan escaped to his truck 3 hours later, he was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He sat in the parking lot watching the sun go down, watching fans stream out disappointed, watching the carnival of racing pack itself up for another year. His phone had 47 missed calls, text messages from numbers he didn't recognize, emails from reporters and lawyers and people claiming to be old colleagues. He ignored all of it except the one from Mrs. Park. "Lily is sleeping. Come when ready. We will have tea." Ryan drove back to the city through darkening highways, thinking about choices and consequences and whether he'd made the right ones. The press conference had exposed him. The race had cost Victoria her championship and probably strengthened Donald's position with the board. The bracket fracture had vindicated his warnings, but also proved the engine still had flaws. Nothing was clean, nothing was simple, nothing had worked out the way it was supposed to. But Carlos Mendez was alive. And in the end, that was the only math that mattered. Mrs. Park's apartment smelled like jasmine tea, and the kimchi Lily had apparently made in industrial quantities. The old woman poured tea without speaking, let Ryan sit in silence for several minutes before saying anything. "She saw the news," Mrs. Park finally said. "Before I could stop her, neighbor's TV was on. Your face was everywhere." Ryan's chest tightened. "What did she say?" "She asked if you were famous. I told her you were her father, and that was more important than famous." She seemed satisfied. Mrs. Park sipped her tea. "Children are simple. Adults make things complicated." "What am I supposed to tell her?" "The truth. That you did important work. That you stopped to take care of her. That you came back because someone needed help. Children understand sacrifice. They live with it every day, sharing toys, waiting turns, choosing between things they want. You just made bigger choices." Ryan drank his tea. It was too hot and burned his tongue, but the pain felt appropriate somehow. "Thank you," he said. "For today. For all the days. For being here when I had nowhere else to turn." I am old woman with too much space and not enough company. You and Lily fill the space. This is fair trade. She stood up slowly. Your daughter is sleeping in guest room. You can take her home or let her sleep. Either is fine. Ryan found Lily curled up under Mrs. Park's quilts, her favorite stuffed bear clutched in one hand. She looked peaceful, innocent, too young to understand that her father's past had just collided with their present in ways that would change everything. He carried her home, tucked her into bed, and sat in the dark living room thinking about tomorrow, about going back to Vortex, about facing whatever came next, about whether he still had a job or if Victoria still had hers. His phone rang. Victoria. You should know, she said. The board voted. I'm out. Effective Monday. Ryan felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. Victoria. They're bringing in an interim CEO, someone Donald recommended naturally. They want to restore stability and confidence. Apparently my firing the COO and pitting our car mid-race doesn't inspire confidence. I'm sorry, this is my fault. No, this is Donald's fault, and the board's fault, and maybe my fault for thinking I could change a system that didn't want to change. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. At least I made it a year. That's longer than some people expected. What are you going to do? Honestly, I have no idea. First time in my life, I don't have a plan. She paused. What about you? What are you going to do? Ryan looked at Lily's door, at the drawing still on his refrigerator, at the apartment that was small and shabby but safe. Same thing I always do. Wake up tomorrow, make breakfast, figure out the next right thing. That simple? That complicated. They sat on the phone in silence for a moment, two people who'd tried to do the right thing and paid the price for it. For what it's worth, Victoria said quietly, I'm glad you came back. I'm glad I met you. I'm glad we told the truth, even if it cost us everything. Me too. Liar, you'd rather still be invisible. Maybe, but being invisible was killing me in slower, quieter ways. At least this way I'm dying honest. Victoria laughed, and this time it sounded real. We're both dramatic disasters. Yeah, we really are. She hung up. Ryan sat in the dark, listening to Lily's soft breathing through the thin apartment walls, and thought about the version of himself that had existed 3 days ago. The invisible man, the ghost, the maintenance worker who'd convinced himself that small and safe was enough. That version was gone now, burned away by press conferences and engine failures and the choice to stop hiding. What came next, Ryan didn't know, but he knew he'd face it as himself, completely, honestly, with all the messy complexity that entailed. And somehow, sitting there in his shabby apartment with his sleeping daughter and his uncertain future, that felt like enough. Monday morning arrived with all the grace of a car crash in slow motion. Ryan woke to 17 missed calls from Vortex HR, a formal termination notice in his email, effective immediately, citing unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information, and Lily standing next to his bed asking why there were news cameras in the parking lot. They're not here for us, Ryan lied, pulling her away from the window. But that lady is pointing at our building. She's confused. Go brush your teeth. Lily went, unconvinced. Ryan looked out the window and confirmed that yes, there were in fact 3 news vans parked across the street, reporters doing stand-ups with his apartment building in the background. Someone had leaked his address. Of course they had. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway because ignoring problems had stopped being an option 3 days ago. Mr. Cole, this is Richard Chen from Chen & Associates. We're a boutique firm specializing in intellectual property litigation. I'd like to discuss representation regarding your stolen designs. I'm not suing anyone. With respect, sir, you have a case worth potentially tens of millions in damages. Vortex has profited enormously from your work. I don't want their money. Then what do you want? Ryan looked at Lily's drawing on the refrigerator, at the toy cars scattered across the living room floor, at the life he'd built that was currently being dismantled by forces he couldn't control. I want people to leave me alone. He hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Different number. Ryan turned it off completely. Getting Lily to school required sneaking out the back entrance and cutting through Mrs. Park's apartment to avoid the reporters. The old woman watched this tactical retreat with the patient expression of someone who'd lived through actual war and understood that sometimes you just had to keep your head down and move.
They will get bored, she said. News people always do. 3 days, maybe 4, they find new story. What if they don't? Then you move. Start over. People do this all the time. Ryan thought about moving, about packing up their shabby apartment and Lily's toys and starting over in some new city where nobody knew his name or cared about racing engines. The idea was both appealing and exhausting in equal measure. He dropped Lily at school through the side entrance, avoiding the main parking lot where he suspected news vans might be waiting. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, intercepted him at the door with a concerned expression. Mr. Cole, I wanted to let you know some of the parents have been asking questions about the news coverage. I've been deflecting, but you should be aware. What kind of questions? Mostly just curiosity, but a few are concerned about, about whether the situation affects the school's reputation. Ryan felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. My kid goes here. I pay the same fees as everyone else. I haven't done anything illegal or dangerous. So unless you're asking me to withdraw her...
No, of course not. I just thought you should know. Ms. Rodriguez softened. For what it's worth, I think what you did was brave, choosing your daughter over your career. More parents should make that choice. Ryan didn't trust himself to respond without his voice breaking, so he just nodded and left.
He drove to Vortex out of habit before remembering he'd been fired. Sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what unemployed people did with their Mondays. He'd been working since he was 16, had never not had somewhere he was supposed to be. His phone, turned back on despite better judgment, buzzed with a text from Marcus. Victoria's cleaning out her office. Thought you should know. Ryan stared at the message. Thought about driving away. Thought about all the reasons he should stay out of whatever was happening inside that building. Then he got out of the truck and walked through the service entrance one more time. The executive floor was quieter than he'd ever heard it. Victoria's office door stood open, boxes scattered around. Her assistant frantically packing things while Victoria herself sat on the floor, surrounded by papers that looked like they'd been in storage for years. You're not supposed to be here, her assistant said when she saw Ryan. Security has orders to escort you out if you show up. Then go get security. Ryan stepped into the office. I'll wait. Victoria looked up from the papers. She was wearing jeans and an old sweater instead of her CEO armor, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd slept about as well as Ryan had. Found something interesting, she said, holding up a folder. My father's personal files. Locked cabinet I never had the key to until the interim CEO's assistant gave me the master set and told me to clear everything out by 5 p.m. What's in them? Letters. From you to my father, dated from about 8 years ago. Victoria stood up, dusted off her jeans. You wrote him every few months after you left, updating him on Lily, sending drawings she made, asking about the company. He wrote back. Never sent the letters, but he wrote them. Ryan's throat went tight. I didn't know that. He kept your address, kept track of you. In his last letter, dated 2 weeks before he died, he wrote that you were the son he never had, that if anything happened to him, someone needed to make sure you and Lily were taken care of. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. He also wrote that he knew about Donald stealing your credit, that he'd been planning to fix it but ran out of time. Victoria, he wanted me to find you, to bring you back, to restore your work and your name and give you the position you deserved. She laughed, but it sounded broken. Took me a year and a corporate scandal to finally do what he asked. The assistant cleared her throat. Ms. Vaughn, we really need to finish packing. The new CEO is doing a walkthrough at 3. Let him walk through. I'm not done here. They can have security remove you. I'd like to see them try. The assistant looked at Ryan like he might be helpful. Ryan shrugged. He'd learned in the last week that Victoria Vaughn didn't do anything she didn't want to do, and trying to move her before she was ready was like trying to move a mountain with strong suggestions. The door opened. Marcus walked in carrying a cardboard box and looking uncomfortable. They're clearing out your engineering files too, he told Victoria, reclassifying everything as corporate property, shredding anything that looks personal. Of course they are. Can't have evidence of human beings working here. Might complicate the liability insurance. Victoria started throwing papers into boxes without much organization. Ryan, you should take these letters. They're addressed to you anyway. Ryan took the folder, opened it carefully and saw his own handwriting from years ago, younger and messier, next to William Vaughn's careful script. Saw Lily's crayon drawings preserved in plastic sleeves. Saw a photograph of Sarah he'd sent, her laughing at something off camera, alive and beautiful and gone. He cared about you, Victoria said quietly. More than I understood. More than he probably should have, given you weren't technically his employee anymore. But he did. He was a good man. He was a complicated man. Good, but complicated. Victoria closed a box, taped it shut. Kind of like you. Marcus was watching them both with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. There's a board meeting happening right now. Donald's pushing to restructure the entire engineering department. Wants to eliminate what he's calling legacy positions and outdated methodologies. Translation, he's firing everyone who knew my father, everyone who might question his version of history. Victoria checked her watch. How long until they vote? It's already done, past 8 to 3. Restructure starts tomorrow. So Marcus, you're probably unemployed by Wednesday, along with most of the senior team. Marcus set down his box. But there's something else. The press is running a follow-up story about the bracket failure from yesterday's race. Engineering analysts are saying if you hadn't pitted when you did, the failure would have been catastrophic. Victoria and Ryan exchanged glances. So we were right, Victoria said. Very right. Publicly, provably right. Which makes the board's decision to fire you look even worse than it already did. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed them headlines. CEO fired after saving driver's life. Vortex board chooses profits over safety. Racing giant in crisis after whistleblower terminations. Well, Victoria said, at least we're failing with good publicity. The door burst open. Donald Sterling walked in, flanked by 2 security guards, and the new interim CEO, a bland corporate type whose name Ryan had already forgotten. Ms. Vaughn, your access to this building ends now, Donald said. His smile was vicious. You've had ample time to collect your personal belongings. Anything remaining becomes company property. I'm still packing. You're still trespassing. And you, Donald pointed at Ryan, you were explicitly terminated and banned from the premises. Your presence here constitutes criminal trespass. Arrest me then. Don't tempt me. The interim CEO looked uncomfortable with the confrontation. Perhaps we can be reasonable about this. Reasonable? Victoria laughed. You want reasonable? Fine, I'll be reasonable. But first, answer me something. Did you know about the bracket failure before you took this position? I don't know what you're talking about. The cooling bracket that nearly killed our driver yesterday. The one Ryan warned about. The one that failed exactly as he predicted. Did Donald mention that when he recommended you for this job? The interim CEO's face went carefully blank. I was briefed on the race results, yes. Were you briefed on the fact that if Ryan hadn't been here, if I hadn't listened to him, we'd be defending ourselves against wrongful death charges right now instead of just bad publicity? That's speculation. It's documented mechanical failure. We have the fractured bracket in the engineering lab. We have data logs showing temperature spikes. We have a dozen engineers who witnessed the analysis. Victoria stepped closer. So when you take over my father's company, when you sit in his office and make decisions about the future, I want you to remember that you're replacing the person who chose safety over winning. Remember that when someone dies because you made the opposite choice. Silence filled the office. Even Donald looked momentarily uncomfortable. Are you finished? The interim CEO asked. Almost. Victoria picked up the last box. Marcus, you're coming with me. I still work here. Not for long. And I'm about to do something stupid that'll require good engineers. You interested? Marcus looked at Ryan. Ryan shrugged. Marcus grinned. Yeah, I'm interested. They walked out together. Victoria, Marcus, and Ryan, past security and Donald's smug face and the corporate apparatus that had decided they were more trouble than they were worth. They took the elevator down in silence, walked through the lobby where employees whispered and stared, and emerged into a parking lot that somehow felt more free than oppressive. So, Marcus said, what's the stupid thing we're doing? I have no idea, Victoria admitted, but I've got a severance package, a lot of anger, and the contact information for every engineer my father ever trusted. Seems like that should add up to something. Ryan's phone rang. He almost ignored it, but the caller ID said Roosevelt Elementary, and his heart stopped. Mr. Cole, this is Principal Matthews. Nothing's wrong with Lily, but we have a situation. Some reporters showed up asking to speak with you. They're claiming they just want your side of the story, but they're making our parents uncomfortable. I've called the police to have them removed from school property, but I thought you should know. Ryan was already running to his truck. I'm coming. Don't let anyone near her. He broke probably 6 traffic laws getting to the school, found the parking lot cordoned off, 2 police cars, and a cluster of reporters being escorted to the sidewalk by officers who looked annoyed at having to deal with this nonsense. Lily was in the principal's office, looking small and scared. She launched herself at Ryan the moment she saw him. Daddy, those people were saying your name. They had cameras. Ms. Rodriguez said I had to come inside, but I don't understand why. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. They're gone now. Principal Matthews looked sympathetic but firm. Mr. Cole, I understand you're in a difficult situation, but I can't have news crews disrupting our campus. If this continues, we may need to discuss alternative arrangements for Lily's education. Ryan felt the last thread of his composure start to fray. You're threatening to kick out my kid because reporters showed up? She didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply saying we need to prioritize the safety and comfort of all our students. If your presence attracts media attention that disrupts the learning environment, then what? I pull her out? Homeschool her? Uproot her entire life because I made the mistake of telling the truth about something? Mr. Cole, please lower your voice. Lower your... No. You know what? No. I've spent 6 years being quiet, being invisible, making myself smaller so I wouldn't inconvenience anyone. And it didn't matter. I still ended up here, with my kid scared and you threatening to punish her for my choices. Lily was crying now, clinging to his leg. Ryan picked her up, held her close. We're leaving, he said. Today. She's not coming back until you can guarantee her safety doesn't depend on whether her father makes the news. He walked out of the principal's office, out of the school, carrying his daughter and feeling the full weight of how thoroughly his attempt to do the right thing had destroyed their lives. The reporters were gone from school property, but lingering on the public sidewalk. Cameras tracked him as he loaded Lily into the truck. Mr. Cole, is it true you're suing Vortex for $100 million? Mr. Cole, how does it feel knowing your whistleblowing cost Victoria Vaughn her job? Mr. Cole, is there any truth to rumors you and Miss Vaughn are romantically involved? Ryan ignored them all, drove away with Lily still crying in the passenger seat and his hands shaking on the steering wheel. I want to go home, Lily said quietly. Me too, baby. But when they got home, there were more reporters. When Ryan called Mrs. Park, she reported that someone had knocked on her door asking about the Cole family. When he tried to take Lily to the park, a photographer followed them. By Wednesday, Ryan had started apartment hunting in different cities. By Thursday, he'd contacted a lawyer about restraining orders. By Friday, he'd stopped sleeping entirely and started seriously considering whether Mrs. Park had been right about moving and starting over. Saturday morning, Victoria showed up at his apartment unannounced, carrying coffee and pastries and looking like she hadn't slept much either. You look terrible, she said by way of greeting. You look like you slept in your car. Close. Friend's couch. Turns out getting fired from a CEO position means losing the company apartment. She handed him coffee. Can I come in? Ryan looked at Lily, who was watching cartoons and eating cereal, looked at the mess of his apartment, boxes half packed, papers everywhere, the chaos of a life being hastily disassembled. You're moving, Victoria said, seeing the boxes. Trying to. Hard to find a landlord who'll rent to someone who's internet famous for all the wrong reasons. Victoria sat down on his couch without invitation. Lily looked at her curiously. Are you the lady from TV? Lily asked. Probably. I've been on TV a lot lately. Daddy says TV people are confused. Your daddy's right. We're very confused. Victoria smiled at Lily, then looked at Ryan. I have a proposition. I'm not interested in lawsuits or tell-all interviews or whatever lawyers have been pitching you. It's none of those things. It's a job offer. Ryan stared at her. You don't have a company anymore. Not yet. But I'm starting one. Small operation. Boutique engineering firm focused on racing applications. Marcus is in. So are 3 other engineers from the old team who got fired in Donald's purge. We've got interest from 2 racing teams who are tired of corporate bureaucracy and want to work with people who actually give a damn about the engineering. Victoria, that's insane. You need capital, facilities, equipment, but I have capital. My severance was generous, and my father left me money that's not tied to Vortex stock. I've got enough to lease a small facility and run lean for 18 months. After that, we either succeed or we don't. You're risking everything on a startup that might fail in a year and a half. As opposed to what? Going to work for another corporation that'll treat me like a diversity hire until I prove myself, then find reasons to undermine me when I do? At least this way I'm failing on my own terms. Victoria leaned forward. I need a chief engineer, someone who understands racing systems at a fundamental level, someone who won't bullshit me or prioritize politics over good work. You need someone who isn't followed by cameras everywhere they go. The cameras will get bored. Mrs. Park was right about that. News cycles move fast. In 2 weeks, we'll be old news. Victoria looked at Lily, then back at Ryan. I'm not asking you to choose between your daughter and the work. I'm asking if you want to build something that lets you do both. Flexible hours, remote work when needed. Bring Lily to the shop if you have to. I don't care about FaceTime or corporate culture. I care about good engineering. Ryan wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her it was too risky, too uncertain, too much exposure when all he wanted was to disappear again. But Lily was watching him with her big eyes, and he thought about the letter he'd written her, about being the kind of father who made brave choices instead of safe ones. What would you call it? He asked. The company. I was thinking Apex Engineering, clean, professional, vaguely automotive without being too specific. Apex Engineering already exists. There's a firm in Detroit. Fine. You name it then. Ryan thought about William Vaughn's letters, about the man who'd seen potential in a 21-year-old kid and given him a chance to build something that mattered. Legacy Motorsport, he said. Because we're building on what came before, not running from it. Victoria smiled. Legacy Motorsport. I like it. So is that a yes? It's a maybe. I need to think about it. Need to talk to Lily. Ryan looked at his daughter. Need to figure out if I can do this without destroying what's left of our stability. Fair enough. Think about it. Let me know by Monday. Victoria stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, your daughter deserves to see you doing work you love. Not because the work is more important than her, but because she should know her father is more than just her father, that he's a whole person with talents and passions and a history that matters. After Victoria left, Ryan sat down next to Lily on the couch. She was still watching cartoons, but her attention was divided between the TV and him. Was that lady offering you a job? Lily asked. Yeah, how'd you know? Because you got the same face you get when I ask if we can get a puppy. Like you want to say yes, but you're worried about if it's a good idea. Ryan laughed despite everything. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because you're busy being worried. Lily turned off the TV, which was unprecedented and slightly alarming. Are you worried about me? Always. That's my job. But like, worried. Like if you take the job, something bad will happen to me. Ryan chose his words carefully. I'm worried that if I take the job, I won't be around as much. That you'll feel like I chose work over you. Lily thought about this seriously. Do you like the work? I used to love it. Then you should do it, because you're sad a lot, Daddy. You try to hide it, but I can tell. And maybe if you did the work you love, you'd be less sad. Ryan felt something break open in his chest. Baby, I'm not sad because of you. I know you're sad because Mommy died, but maybe you could be both. Sad about Mommy and happy about work. People can be 2 things at once. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that Ryan had to turn away to hide the tears. His 6-year-old daughter had just articulated something he'd been unable to admit for 6 years, that choosing Lily hadn't made him stop grieving Sarah, and that maybe he didn't have to keep punishing himself by staying small. That weekend, Ryan took Lily to visit the facility Victoria had leased. It was a converted warehouse in an industrial area. Nothing fancy, but it had good bones, high ceilings, loading docks, space for equipment and workstations. Marcus was already there with 2 other engineers Ryan vaguely recognized, setting up computers and arguing about optimal workshop layout. The fabrication area needs to be separate from the design space. That's inefficient. We should integrate them so designers can walk directly to the machines.
And breathe metal dust all day? Great plan. Lily tugged on Ryan's hand. Is this where you'd work? Maybe, if I said yes. It's kind of messy. Yeah, but it could be good, with the right people and the right work. Victoria emerged from what would eventually be her office, saw Ryan and Lily, and smiled. You came. Wanted to see the space. Make sure you weren't asking me to work in some condemned building. It's only slightly condemned. The inspector said we just need to fix the wiring, add fire suppression, and replace about 40% of the roof. Victoria knelt down to Lily's level. What do you think? Could your dad work here? Lily looked around critically. Do you have snacks? Not yet, but we could get snacks. What kind do you like? The cheese crackers shaped like fish, and juice boxes, the fruit punch kind, not the apple kind. I'll add it to the supply list. Victoria stood up. Ryan, can I show you something? She led him to the back corner where they'd set up a small kitchenette area. But next to it was another space, empty now, but clearly designated for something specific. I was thinking this could be a kid zone, Victoria said. Nothing fancy, just a table for homework, some toys, maybe a TV for when Lily needs to hang out after school. So you don't have to choose between being here and picking her up on time. Ryan stared at the space, at the thoughtfulness of it, at the fact that Victoria had planned for his daughter before he'd even said yes. You're really serious about this? Dead serious. I'm not building another vortex. I'm building something different, something that remembers people are humans first and employees second. Victoria leaned against the wall. My father used to say the best companies are built by people who care about each other as much as they care about the work. I didn't understand what he meant until I watched you choose Lily over everything. That's the kind of priority system I want to build into the foundation here. Ryan looked at Lily, who was now helping Marcus organize tools and asking detailed questions about what each one did. Looked at the empty warehouse that could become something meaningful. Looked at Victoria, who'd lost her company and her father's legacy, but was choosing to build something new instead of giving up. Okay, he said, I'm in. Yeah? Yeah, but I have conditions. Lily comes first, always. If there's a conflict between a deadline and her school play, the school play wins. If she's sick, I work from home. If the cameras come back, we figure out protection protocols. Done. Anything else? I want equity. Not a lot, but enough that I'm building this thing with you, not just working for you. Victoria extended her hand. 20%. Non-negotiable. You're not an employee, you're a partner. They shook on it. Across the warehouse, Marcus whooped and started blasting music from a portable speaker someone had brought. The other engineers joined in, and suddenly the empty space felt less like a condemned warehouse and more like the beginning of something that might actually work. Over the next month, Legacy Motorsport took shape in fits and starts. They worked long hours getting the facility up to code, installing equipment, building relationships with suppliers who were willing to take a chance on a startup with no track record but impressive credentials. Ryan brought Lily to the shop most afternoons. She did homework at the table Victoria had set up, made friends with the engineers, learned the names of tools, and occasionally helped with tasks that required small hands or a 6-year-old's perspective on color schemes. The news cycle moved on like Mrs. Park had predicted. The cameras disappeared. The reporters found new scandals. Ryan's name faded from headlines and became just another story people vaguely remembered but couldn't quite place. Vortex Motorsport, meanwhile, was imploding spectacularly. Donald's restructuring had gutted their engineering talent. The interim CEO had made decisions that prioritized short-term profits over long-term stability. 2 more sponsors pulled out. Their next race ended in mechanical failure. Nothing catastrophic, but embarrassing enough to make headlines. Ryan tried not to feel vindicated, mostly succeeded. Legacy Motorsport's first client was a small racing team that had worked with Victoria's father years ago and trusted her judgment. They needed a complete engine redesign for their GT4 program. Modest work, but enough to prove the concept. Ryan designed it in 6 weeks. The engine performed beautifully in testing. The team signed a 3-year contract. Word spread. More teams reached out. Engineers from other companies started calling, asking if Legacy was hiring. Within 3 months, they'd gone from 5 people in a converted warehouse to 12 people with a growing reputation for honest work and innovative solutions. It wasn't easy. Money was tight. Hours were long.
There were setbacks and failures and moments when Ryan wondered if they'd all made a terrible mistake. But there were also moments when Lily fell asleep on the workshop couch while Ryan finished a calculation, and Marcus would throw a blanket over her without being asked. Moments when Victoria brought dinner for everyone and they'd eat together, talking about racing and life and the future they were building. Moments when Ryan realized he was happy. Not the simple happiness of his invisible years, but the complicated happiness of being fully himself. Father, engineer, partner in something meaningful. It was messier and more uncertain, but it felt real in ways the hiding never had. One evening, about 4 months after Legacy's founding, Ryan was working late on a new suspension design when Victoria knocked on his office door. "Lily's asleep in this break room," she said. "Mrs. Park called. Said she's fine watching her another hour if you need it." "I'm almost done, just trying to solve this damping equation." Victoria came in, looked at his whiteboard covered in calculations. "You miss it sometimes, the simplicity of before." It wasn't a question. Ryan considered lying, but Victoria deserved better. "Sometimes. Usually around 3 a.m. when I'm trying to figure out payroll and wondering if we bid a contract too low. But then I remember what simple felt like slowly disappearing. And I'll take complicated over that any day." "Your father would be proud," Ryan said, "of what you built here, of the choice you made." "Our choice. You could have walked away, found a quiet job somewhere else, stayed invisible." "Yeah, but then I'd have to explain to Lily why I chose fear over truth. And I'm trying to be the kind of father who shows her how to be brave, even when it's hard." Victoria smiled. "You're doing better than you think." She left him to his calculations. Ryan worked another hour, then packed up his things and gently woke Lily. She was drowsy and complaining, but she wrapped her arms around his neck and fell back asleep against his shoulder as he carried her to the truck. Driving home through quiet streets, Ryan thought about the different versions of himself and how they'd finally started to integrate into something whole. The grieving widower, the devoted father, the brilliant engineer, the man trying to build something that mattered. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and uncertain and sometimes overwhelming. But it was honest. And honest, Ryan was learning, was enough. 8 months into Legacy Motorsports' existence, Ryan found himself standing in front of 40 junior engineering students at the State University, feeling completely out of his depth. Victoria had volunteered him for a guest lecture without asking, claiming it would be good for the company's profile and stop hiding your expertise like it's contraband. Ryan suspected she just enjoyed watching him squirm. "So," he began, facing a sea of 20-year-olds who looked at him with the mix of curiosity and skepticism reserved for people who'd been internet famous for 15 minutes. 6 months ago, I'm supposed to talk about failure analysis and design integrity, but honestly, I'm better at showing than telling. Anyone here actually interested in racing systems, or did you just come for the extra credit?" About half the hands went up. Honest enough. "Okay, forget the prepared lecture. Let's talk about the stupidest design decision you'll ever make, thinking you can optimize a system without understanding why the original designer made the choices they did." He spent the next 90 minutes walking them through the GT7 saga, leaving out the personal drama but keeping the technical lessons. Showed them the original bracket design versus the improved version. Explained how small changes compound into catastrophic failures. Talked about the difference between making something work and making something last. During the question period, a kid in the back raised his hand. "Is it true you went back to maintenance work because you couldn't handle the pressure of professional engineering?" The room went quiet. Ryan could see the professor, Dr. Martinez, who'd invited him, preparing to intervene, but Ryan waved her off. "No, I went back to maintenance work because my wife died and I had a newborn daughter, and I was so broken I could barely remember to eat, let alone design engines." Ryan kept his voice level. "I chose the job that let me be present for my kid. Some people thought that made me weak. Turns out those people never had to choose between their career and another human being's survival." The kid looked embarrassed. "I didn't mean, I know what you meant. And here's what I learned. There's no such thing as work-life balance. That phrase assumes work and life are separate things you weigh against each other. But they're not. They're integrated. Every choice you make in one affects the other. The question isn't balance, it's priority. What matters most when everything's falling apart?" Another student, a young woman in the front row, spoke up. But don't you regret losing those years, missing out on advancement and recognition? Every single day, Ryan admitted. And also, not at all. Both things are true simultaneously. I regret missing the work I loved. I don't regret being there when my daughter learned to walk, learned to read, learned that her father would choose her over everything else every single time. Adults spend too much time pretending choices are clean. They're not. They're messy and they hurt, and you live with the consequences either way. After the lecture, Dr. Martinez caught up with him in the parking lot. That was either the most honest or most depressing guest lecture we've ever had. I haven't decided which. Probably both. The students needed to hear it. We train them on technical skills, but forget to prepare them for the human cost of this career. She handed him a card. If you ever want to do this regularly, teach a semester course maybe. Let me know. We could use someone who doesn't sugarcoat the reality. Ryan pocketed the card without committing. The idea of teaching appealed to him in ways he hadn't expected, but adding another responsibility to the chaos of legacy felt premature. He drove back to the workshop thinking about the question that Kid had asked, about weakness and strength and the ways people judged choices they'd never had to make themselves. Thought about Sarah and whether she'd be proud of the man he'd become or disappointed he'd taken so long to stop hiding. The workshop was buzzing when he arrived. Marcus met him at the door with an expression that cycled between excited and terrified. We have a situation. Good situation or bad situation? Depends on your definition. Vortex Motorsport just declared bankruptcy. Complete collapse. Board fired the interim CEO, Donald Sterling's being investigated for embezzlement, and about 15 senior engineers just contacted us asking if we're hiring. Ryan processed this. Vortex, the billion-dollar empire, the company that had stolen his work and fired him, was dead. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he just felt tired. Where's Victoria? Her office, on the phone with someone, has been for an hour. Ryan found Victoria pacing her office, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand running through her hair in a way that meant she was either very stressed or very focused. She saw him, held up one finger for, "Give me a minute," then wrapped up whatever conversation she was having. "That was the bankruptcy trustee," she said after hanging up. "Vortex's assets are being liquidated. They're auctioning off equipment, intellectual property, everything, including the GT7 design documentation." Ryan's stomach dropped. "They can't sell that. It's my work. Legally, it's corporate property. Your lawsuit's still pending, but until it's resolved, the trustee can sell it to the highest bidder." Victoria sat down heavily. "But here's the thing. We could buy it. Not the whole company, just the GT7 IP and related assets. The trustee's motivated to move things quickly. If we bid strategically, we don't have that kind of capital. We have enough. Barely. It would drain our reserves and put us in a precarious position for the next quarter, but it's possible." Ryan thought about the GT7, about 10 years of his life and Sarah's memory, and the machine that had defined him before he'd walked away. Thought about whether owning it again would heal something or just reopen wounds. "What would we do with it?" he asked. "Whatever you want. Redesign it, license it. Build a new version that fixes all the flaws. Make it what you originally intended instead of what corporate compromise turned it into." Victoria leaned forward. "Or we let it go. Let someone else buy it and do whatever they want with your legacy. Either choice is valid." Ryan walked to her window, looked out at the warehouse floor where his team was working on 3 different projects, where Lily was doing homework at her table while chatting with one of the junior engineers about dinosaurs and aerodynamics. If we buy it and fail, if the financial strain kills the company, everyone here loses their jobs. The engineers who trusted us, Marcus, you, that's a lot of people betting on my ego. It's not ego to want control over your own work, isn't it? I spent 6 years telling myself I didn't care about recognition or ownership. That being Lily's dad was enough. If I buy back the GT7, am I doing it for the right reasons or because I'm still trying to prove something to people whose opinions shouldn't matter? Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something my father told me right before he died?" "Yeah." He said the hardest part of building something meaningful is accepting that your motives will always be mixed. You'll never do anything for purely selfless reasons or purely selfish ones. You'll always be acting from a combination of ego and love, fear and courage, past wounds and future hopes. The question isn't whether your motives are pure, it's whether the outcome serves more than just yourself. Ryan turned from the window. Who does buying back the GT7 serve? Us, obviously, but also every engineer who's ever had their work stolen. Every person who's been told their value is whatever the corporation decides it is. Every designer who's watched their vision get compromised by people who don't understand what they built. Victoria stood up. And maybe Lily. So she grows up knowing her father fought to reclaim something that was taken from him. That he didn't just accept injustice because it was easier than fighting back. Ryan thought about the letter he'd written Lily. About being brave instead of safe. About showing her what it looked like to stand up for yourself even when the cost was high. Okay, he said, let's buy it. But we do it smart. Minimum bid to win, nothing more. And if we get it, we don't hoard it. We open source parts of the design. Make it available to other engineers. Turn it from a proprietary asset into a teaching tool.
Victoria smiled. Your father would have loved that. The idea of making knowledge accessible instead of locked behind corporate walls. He wasn't my father. He was more of a father to you than your biological one ever was. You know it. I know it. Let's stop pretending otherwise.
The auction was handled online, impersonal, and clinical. Ryan sat next to Victoria in her office, watching the bids tick up on a screen while his heart tried to hammer through his ribs. They'd set their maximum at an amount that would hurt but not destroy them. If bidding went higher, they'd walk away. It went higher, then higher again. Ryan watched their maximum approach and felt the familiar tightness of loss settling in his chest. We're out, he said when the bidding hit their ceiling. Not yet. Victoria entered a new bid, $5,000 above their maximum. Victoria, we agreed. I know what we agreed. I'm changing the agreement. She bid again as someone else countered. This is my decision, my risk. If it destroys the company, that's on me. That's not how partnerships work. Then fire me. But I'm not letting someone else own your work. Not again. They went back and forth 3 more times. Each bid felt like a punch to Ryan's financial anxiety. Then, finally, the counter-bidding stopped. 30 seconds passed. 60. The auction software declared them winners. Victoria slumped in her chair. We just spent money we don't really have on intellectual property we might not be able to monetize. I think I'm having a panic attack. Welcome to entrepreneurship. The panic attacks are complimentary. Marcus stuck his head in. Did we win? We won. Are we bankrupt? Not yet. Check back in 3 months. Word spread through the workshop. The team gathered in Victoria's office, cramming into a space designed for maybe 4 people. Someone had brought cheap champagne. Someone else had brought Lily, who wanted to know what everyone was celebrating. We bought back something that was stolen from your dad a long time ago, Victoria explained. Which means now we get to decide what to do with it instead of someone else making that choice. Like when I got my bike back from the mean kid who took it? Exactly like that. Lily considered this. Are you going to punch the people who took it? Because Miss Rodriguez says punching is not appropriate conflict resolution. The engineers laughed. Ryan pulled Lily close. No punching, just making sure it gets used the right way this time. That night, after everyone went home, Ryan stayed late staring at the digital files the bankruptcy trustee had transferred. 10 years of his work returned to him. He opened the original GT7 documentation, his handwriting in the comments, his calculations, his warnings that had been ignored. He opened a new file and started writing. Not a redesign, not a modification, but a comprehensive educational document explaining every decision he'd made, every compromise he'd rejected, every failure mode he'd anticipated. He wrote it the way he wished someone had taught him when he was 21 and brilliant and convinced engineering was just math and physics instead of math and physics and human judgment and inevitable compromise. He wrote it for the students in Dr. Martinez's class, for the engineers at Legacy, for Lily, when she was old enough to understand that her father had built something that mattered and had almost lost it and had fought to get it back not out of ego, but out of a stubborn belief that the truth shouldn't stay buried just because it was convenient. He wrote until his coffee went cold and his eyes burned and Lily called, asking when he was coming home. The next 6 months were brutal. Legacy Motorsport teetered on the edge of financial disaster more times than Ryan wanted to count. They lost a major contract when a client went with a more established firm. They had to delay hiring a machinist they desperately needed. There were nights when Ryan lay awake doing mental math about payroll and wondering if they'd made a catastrophic mistake. But they also landed a partnership with a European racing team that had followed the Vortex scandal and respected Victoria's integrity. They published the open-source portions of the GT7 documentation and got referenced in 3 academic papers. Dr. Martinez invited Ryan to teach a summer intensive course, which he accepted because the money helped and because he discovered he actually enjoyed teaching. Lily turned 7, then started 2nd grade, then joined the robotics club and announced she wanted to be an engineer like Daddy and Victoria and Marcus. Ryan tried not to feel the weight of that responsibility, his daughter following in his footsteps, but mostly failed. He worried she was choosing engineering because she thought it would make him proud, not because she genuinely loved it. "She's 7, Victoria pointed out when he voiced this concern. "Next month she'll want to be a veterinarian. The month after that, a professional dinosaur hunter. Let her explore." What if she feels pressured? By who? You've never pushed her toward anything except being kind and doing her homework. You're inventing problems that don't exist. Victoria was probably right, but parental anxiety didn't respond well to logic. Meanwhile, Vortex Motorsports Corp. continued providing entertainment. Donald Sterling was indicted on 6 counts of fraud. The bankruptcy revealed he'd been siphoning money for years through shell contractors. 3 board members resigned amid the scandal. The racing world collectively decided Vortex's collapse was a cautionary tale about what happened when corporations prioritize profit over people. Ryan tried not to feel smug about this. Mostly failed at that too. 1 year after Legacy's founding, they held a small anniversary party at the workshop. 15 employees now, 3 major contracts, and enough financial stability that Ryan only woke up panicking about money twice a week instead of daily. Marcus gave a speech that was mostly jokes about Ryan's terrible coffee-making skills. Victoria thanked everyone for taking a chance on an untested company. Ryan stood in front of his team, people he'd hired and trusted and built something with, and felt the unfamiliar sensation of pride mixed with gratitude, mixed with the persistent fear that it could all disappear if he wasn't careful. "I'm not good at speeches," he started, "but I want you to know that a year ago I was mopping floors and hiding from my own life and convinced that small and safe was the only way to survive. You all believed in something bigger than safe. You believed we could build a company that treated people like humans instead of assets. That prioritized good work over corporate politics. That proved you don't have to compromise your integrity to be successful." He paused, looking at the faces watching him. "We're not perfect. We've made mistakes. We'll make more. But we're trying to do this right, and that matters. So thank you for being here, for trusting this weird experiment, for showing up even when the outcome was uncertain." Later, after most people had left, Ryan found Victoria on the loading dock staring at the city lights. She'd been quiet during the party, smiling at the right moments, but somehow distant. "You okay?" he asked. "My father died a year ago this week," she said. "I keep thinking about what he'd say about all this, whether he'd be proud or disappointed that I abandoned Vortex. You didn't abandon it. You were pushed out for doing the right thing. Same result either way. The company he built is dead. Everything he worked for, gone." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "I keep wondering if I should have fought harder to save it, compromised more, played the politics better." Ryan sat down next to her on the dock. "Your father told me once that companies are temporary but principles are permanent. That if you have to choose between preserving an institution and preserving your integrity, always choose integrity. The institution will die eventually anyway, but your character lasts." He said that, word for word. I was 22 and about to compromise on a design I knew was flawed because a client was pushing back. He told me that the moment I started accepting substandard work to keep clients happy was the moment I stopped being an engineer and became a salesman. Ryan looked at her. Vortex died because it stopped caring about engineering and started caring about stock prices. You couldn't have saved it without becoming the thing that killed it. Victoria wiped her eyes quickly. "I miss him. Miss having someone who understood the weight of this, who knew what it cost to make the hard choices. You have that. You have all of us. Maybe we're not your father, but we understand what you're building, what you're trying to prove." "What am I trying to prove?" "That companies can be different, that you can prioritize people and still succeed, that your father's vision wasn't naive, it was just incompatible with the system he was working in." Ryan stood up, offered his hand to help her up. "You're building the company he wanted Vortex to be. That's not abandonment, that's evolution. They walked back inside together. Through the windows, Ryan could see Lily asleep on the break room couch, curled up under the blanket Marcus kept there specifically for her impromptu naps. Could see the workshop floor with its equipment and projects and evidence of work that mattered. Could see the life he'd built from the ruins of the one he'd lost. It wasn't the life he'd imagined at 21, when he'd thought success meant building engines that won championships and made him famous. It wasn't the life he'd settled for at 26, when he'd convinced himself that being invisible was the same as being safe.
It was something messier and more complicated. A life where he was Lily's father and Victoria's partner and a teacher and an engineer and a man still figuring out how to carry grief without letting it crush him. Where some days were triumphant and some days were disasters, and most days were somewhere in between. 2 years after the Vortex scandal broke, Ryan got a call from an unexpected source. Carlos Mendez, the driver whose life he'd saved with that emergency pit call.
Mr. Cole, I hope you remember me.
Of course. How are you? Good. Great, actually. I'm racing for a new team this season, and we're looking for an engineering partner. Someone who understands safety isn't just about meeting regulations, but about actually giving a damn if drivers go home alive. Carlos paused. I'd like to work with Legacy. If you're interested.
They signed the contract 3 weeks later. It was the biggest deal Legacy had landed, the kind that would stabilize their finances for years and establish them as serious players in the racing world. But more than that, it felt like vindication, like proof that choosing to save a life over winning a championship had been the right call, even when everyone had questioned it. The first race with Carlos's new team was scheduled for a Saturday in May. Lily was 8 now, tall enough to ride the big kid rides at the amusement park, and convinced she knew everything about everything. She insisted on coming to the race, wanted to see the engines she'd heard about for years actually perform. Ryan and Victoria took her, along with Marcus and half the Legacy team. They stood in the pit watching Carlos climb into the cockpit, watching the pre-race rituals Ryan remembered from another lifetime. You nervous? Victoria asked. Terrified. If something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong. You've checked that engine 17 times. It's perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. Good enough is good enough. Stop trying to control everything. The race started clean. Carlos ran a smart race, pushing when it mattered but never taking stupid risks. The Legacy engine performed flawlessly. No temperature spikes, no unexpected failures, just pure reliable power exactly as designed. They finished third. Not a win, but a solid result that put Legacy on the map as a legitimate engineering firm. In the celebration afterward, Carlos found Ryan and wrapped him in a hug that lifted him off the ground. Thank you, Carlos said, for the engine, for the pit call that saved my life 2 years ago, for giving a damn about more than just winning. That's the job. No, that's you. The job is building fast engines. You build engines that keep people alive. There's a difference. Watching Carlos celebrate with his team, Ryan thought about the different ways success could be measured. Championships won versus lives saved. Money earned versus integrity maintained. Recognition gained versus relationships preserved. He'd spent so long thinking he had to choose between those things, between being an engineer and being a father, between mattering to the world and mattering to Lily, between his past self and his present one. Turned out he didn't have to choose. He just had to stop pretending the different parts of himself were incompatible. That evening, driving home with Lily asleep in the back seat and Victoria riding shotgun scrolling through congratulatory messages, Ryan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it. Contentment. Not happiness, exactly. Not the absence of struggle or fear or uncertainty, but a sense that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, with exactly the people who mattered most. You're smiling, Victoria observed. That's unusual. I'm having a moment of existential peace. Don't ruin it with commentary. Noted. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then, Ryan? Yeah? Thank you. For coming back. For being honest when it would have been easier to stay quiet. For building this with me. Victoria looked out the window. I don't say it enough, but you changed my life. Saved my company. Showed me what real leadership looks like. You did that yourself. We did it together. That's the point. She turned to face him. I spent so long thinking I had to be like my father, had to fill his shoes perfectly, or I was failing.
But you showed me it's okay to build something new, to honor what came before without being trapped by it. Ryan thought about William Vaughn's letters, about the man who'd believed in him when he was 21 and arrogant and thought he knew everything, about the father figure he'd lost and the partnership he'd gained. Your dad would be proud of you, Ryan said, of what you built, of the person you became, of the way you chose truth over comfort. You think so? I know so. 3 years after Legacy Motorsports' founding, they moved into a bigger facility, 28 employees, 6 major contracts, and enough stability that Ryan only occasionally woke up at 3 a.m. worrying about money. Lily was 9, still wanted to be an engineer, and had started asking technical questions Ryan actually had to think about before answering. She'd also started asking about Sarah more, not just the basic facts of her death, but what she was like, what she cared about, whether she'd be proud of the life they'd built. Ryan answered as honestly as he could, told Lily about Sarah's laugh and her terrible singing and the way she'd believe people were fundamentally good, even when evidence suggested otherwise. Told her that Sarah would absolutely be proud, not of the engineering or the company, but of the fact that they'd survived, that they'd found ways to be happy again, that grief hadn't destroyed them. "Do you still miss her?" Lily asked one night while Ryan was tucking her in. "Every single day. But you're happy too." "Yeah. How can you be both?" Ryan thought about how to explain the way hearts expanded to hold contradictions. How you could miss someone desperately and still build a life worth living. How grief and joy weren't opposites but could exist simultaneously. "Because people are complicated," he said finally. "We contain multitudes. We can be sad about what we lost and grateful for what we have. We can wish things were different while accepting that they're not. We can carry the people we loved even after they're gone." Lily processed this with the seriousness of someone twice her age. "I think Mommy would like Victoria." The observation caught Ryan off guard. "Yeah?" "Yeah. Because Victoria's smart and doesn't treat me like a baby. And she makes you laugh. And she cares about the same things Mommy cared about, doing good work and being honest and making sure people are safe." Ryan felt his throat tighten. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't notice because you're busy doing engine stuff." He laughed and kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving her door cracked open the way she liked it. In the hallway, he stood for a moment thinking about what Lily had said, about Victoria and Sarah and the ways people could matter without replacing each other, about how healing didn't mean forgetting and moving forward didn't mean leaving the past behind. His phone buzzed, text from Victoria. "Engineering emergency. Need you at the shop." Ryan's stomach dropped. Emergency meant something had failed, which meant potential danger, which meant all his anxiety about things going wrong came flooding back. He called Mrs. Park, dropped off Lily with promises to be back soon, and drove to the workshop faster than was probably legal. The lights were all on when he arrived. His entire team was there, gathered around something in the main work area. Ryan's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Had an engine failed? Was someone hurt? Had they lost a contract? He pushed through the crowd and found Victoria standing next to a custom racing engine mounted on a display stand. It was beautiful, all polished chrome and precision engineering, with a plaque reading, "The Sarah Cole Memorial Engine, built with love by Legacy Motorsport." Ryan couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "It's not the GT7, Victoria said quietly. "It's something new. Something we designed from scratch using everything we learned. Every mistake we've made. Every lesson you taught us about prioritizing safety over speed, integrity over shortcuts." Marcus stepped forward. "We built it on our own time, nights and weekends. Everyone contributed something. Design work, fabrication, testing. We wanted to give you something that honored your wife, that showed we understood why you made the choices you made." Ryan walked around the engine, seeing his team's work in every detail, seeing the way they'd incorporated his design philosophy, seeing the care and thought and love that had gone into building something that existed not to win races or make money, but simply to matter. "It's for Lily," Victoria said, "for when she's old enough to understand what her mother meant to you. What she means to all of us, even though we never met her, because Sarah's the reason you became the kind of engineer who cares about more than just the engineering, who remembers there are people inside the machines we build." Ryan tried to speak and couldn't, tried again and managed. "Thank you. I don't have words." "You don't need words," Marcus said.
You just need to know we see you, all of you, not just the brilliant engineer, but the father and the widower and the person trying to do right by everyone while carrying weight most of us can't imagine. They stood together in the workshop, this team Ryan had helped build, this family he'd found in the ruins of everything he'd lost. And for the first time in years, Ryan felt the full weight of his grief without it crushing him. Because grief, he'd learned, wasn't something you got over. It was something you carried. And if you were lucky, you found people who'd help you carry it, who'd see your broken places and build something beautiful around them instead of asking you to pretend they didn't exist. 5 years after Ryan Cole walked into a restricted workshop and fixed an engine nobody else could, Legacy Motorsport had become exactly what Victoria dreamed it could be. Not the biggest firm in racing, not the most famous or most profitable, but the one with a reputation for doing things right, for caring about people as much as performance, for proving that integrity and success weren't mutually exclusive. Ryan stood in front of another group of engineering students. Teaching was part of his regular schedule now, something he'd discovered he loved almost as much as the design work itself, and talked about failure and resilience and the ways people built lives from broken pieces. The question I get asked most, he told them, is whether I regret walking away from my career, whether I think it was worth it, giving up advancement and recognition to raise my daughter. He paused, looking at these young faces who hadn't yet learned how complicated life could get. And the truth is, I regret parts of it. I missed work I loved. I missed feeling like I mattered in ways that went beyond my small apartment and smaller paycheck. I missed being seen as competent instead of invisible. The students were quiet, listening. But I don't regret choosing Lily, because here's what nobody tells you about sacrifice. It's not about martyring yourself for some noble cause. It's about deciding what you can live without and what you can't. I could live without recognition. I couldn't live with being an absent father. I could live without professional advancement. I couldn't live with my daughter not knowing she was my priority. A student raised her hand. But you came back eventually. So was the sacrifice necessary? Or did you just delay the inevitable? Both. The sacrifice was necessary because I wasn't ready to come back until I did. Until Lily was old enough to understand that my work didn't mean she mattered less. Until I'd done enough healing to be more than just my grief. Ryan leaned against the desk. Coming back wasn't about reclaiming my old life. It was about integrating who I was with who I'd become. About building something new that had space for all of me. The engineer, the father, the widower, the teacher. You don't get that kind of integration by rushing. You get it by being patient with your own broken pieces. After class, Dr. Martinez caught up with him. The department wants to offer you a permanent position. Associate professor, tenure track. You teach 2 courses per semester plus advise graduate students. Full benefits, decent salary, more stability than the startup life provides. Ryan thought about it. About trading the uncertainty of legacy for the security of academia. About having guaranteed income and health insurance and a retirement plan. Can I think about it? Of course. But Ryan, you're good at this. Really good. The students connect with you because you're honest about the cost of this work. About the choices they'll face. They need that perspective. He drove back to Legacy thinking about choices and their consequences. About the different versions of life available to him and which one felt most true to who he was now. Victoria was in her office when he arrived, video conferencing with a potential client. She saw him through the glass and waved, then wrapped up her call and came out. You look contemplative. That's either very good or very bad. Ryan told her about the job offer, watched her process it. That's amazing, she said, and also potentially devastating for Legacy. You're our chief engineer, our technical anchor. If you leave, I'm not leaving, but I'm thinking about splitting my time, teaching part-time, working here part-time. It would mean hiring another senior engineer to pick up some of my load. Would mean trusting other people with work I usually control. Victoria smiled. Sounds like growth. Sounds terrifying. Same thing. They restructured Ryan's role over the next few months. He brought on a brilliant young engineer named Aisha, who'd graduated from Dr. Martinez's program and shared his philosophy about safety-first design. Started teaching 2 courses per semester while maintaining oversight of Legacy's major projects. Learned to delegate and trust and accept that other people could do good work, even if it wasn't exactly how he would have done it. Lily turned 10, then 11, then started asking about college, even though she was still in elementary school. She joined the robotics team, won a regional competition, announced she definitely wanted to be an engineer, but maybe also a teacher because you can do two things, right, Daddy? Like you do? You can do as many things as you want, Ryan told her, as long as you do them honestly and treat people well and remember that being smart isn't the same as being kind. One evening, 6 years after everything had fallen apart and come back together in new configurations, Ryan found himself alone in the legacy workshop. Everyone had gone home. The building was quiet except for the hum of equipment and the distant sound of traffic. He walked through the space, touching machines and workbenches, thinking about the journey from invisible maintenance worker to this, co-owner of a successful firm, teacher, father to a daughter who was becoming her own person, partner to people who'd built something meaningful together. Sarah's memorial engine sat in the place of honor near the entrance. Legacy used it for training new engineers, teaching them the principles of careful design and integrated systems thinking. Lily had asked about it once, and Ryan had explained that it represented her mother's belief that people mattered more than achievements. That love was the foundation of all good work. Victoria found him standing there, lost in thought. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about how none of this turned out the way I planned. How I spent years thinking I had to choose between different versions of myself, and it turned out I just had to stop fighting the complexity. Complexity is underrated," says the woman who started a company on principle and somehow made it work. We made it work, together. That's the point. Victoria stood next to him, both of them looking at Sarah's engine. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy? Really happy? Not just content or okay or managing?" Ryan thought about it. About happiness and what it meant. About whether anyone who'd loved and lost could ever be simply happy without qualification. "I'm happy in the way broken things can be happy," he said finally. "Not perfectly whole, but mended enough to function. Not without grief, but with enough joy to balance it. Not uncomplicated, but authentically myself in all my messy complexity." He looked at Victoria. "Is that enough?" "It's more than enough. It's everything." They stood together in the quiet workshop, two people who'd learned that success wasn't about perfection or winning or being the best. It was about showing up honestly, doing good work, treating people well, building something that mattered for reasons beyond profit. It was about making choices that let you sleep at night, even when those choices cost you things you wanted. About being the kind of person your daughter could respect and your colleagues could trust, and you could face in the mirror without shame. It was about understanding that hiding from life wasn't safety. It was just a slower kind of death. That being seen, truly seen in all your broken, complicated humanity, was worth the risk of exposure. Ryan had learned these lessons the hard way, through loss and grief and years of pretending to be nobody. Had learned them again through the painful process of becoming visible, of reclaiming his work, of building something new from the ruins of what he'd lost. And standing there in the workshop he'd helped build, surrounded by evidence of good work and honest effort, and people who cared about more than just winning, Ryan understood that this messy, complicated, imperfect life was exactly what he'd been fighting for all along. Not perfection, not redemption, not even healing, really. Just the simple, difficult, beautiful work of being fully human in a world that constantly asked you to be less. He thought Sarah would approve. He knew Lily would understand. And for the first time in 6 years, that was enough.